Quarterwags really ran it as a family organization. You know, good or bad, it was a family-run business.
Why it changed hands, I couldn't tell you. And when we were, you know, didn't pay attention to any of the politics, you know, of the racetrack itself. Just as long as the doors were open, we were there.
John Holstein was not happy because of the cash loss, I think. And Terry was trying to run it more as the bottom line was the bottom line.
Terry came out of the sports car club. So Terry, I don't think, knew a modified from a pogo stick when he came in. Outside of the year he did PR.
Terry worked as a PR guy for the Quarterways the last year they had, so we got to know him, and then the next year he came in and took it over.
John and Terry were friends, I guess.
John Holstein asked me if I would run it. It was our intention that I'd be there a couple of years, get it pointed in the right direction, and go on and do something else. Early on, I get a phone call from John Brouwer Jr. And he said, "Hey, I understand you're taking over at the track. I don't know if you know, but my family was involved there for years." I said, "Yeah, I've heard your name, I've met your son, whatever." "Well, me and my partner Dave Shippey would like to take you to lunch." So I said, "Sure, I'll go to lunch." So they basically were doubting Thomases. How did you come out of nowhere and get handed the keys to this racetrack? What the heck have you ever done that would prepare you for this?
I've always known Terry, you know, he's a Groton guy, and so I knew him. Actually, his mother was a teacher at Fitch where I went to school, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I knew Terry and I was comfortable with him coming in, but there was the bulk of the competitors that really didn't know who Terry was.
Nobody really knew him, or at least I didn't know of him, and it was all kind of new to me.
Brouwer and Shippey, they really grilled me for a good couple of hours, and they, you know, just wanted to know what it was. And they started. I said, "Well, how would you do it? How did you do this?" And I kind of turned it on them and said, you know, and so I was a sponge. I just soaked up on the stuff, and at the end of it, they were, you know, they more or less said, "Okay, I think we underestimated you. You got a little bit more moxie for this job than you like." But the reason I remembered is I said, "Well, guys, to prove to you that I have what it takes to be a good race promoter, I chose the restaurant. I didn't realize they didn't take charge cards, and I don't have any cash, so you're paying the bill." So what better promoter is there than me? And that's kind of how we got started. Shortly thereafter, he's at the racetrack with me, and he says, "Hey, Teddy Christopher's here tonight." He says, "Oh, wait a minute, you don't even know who Teddy Christopher is, do you?" So I had heard the name, but he was right, and then he took me over and introduced me. And John Brouwer Sr. would offer me input either in a critical way or a supportive way throughout my career there. And we didn't always agree, but you know, he changed the schedule. You know, he said, "I've seen promoter after promoter in this place try to open early and then go dark for a few weeks, and then they decide to race and it rains for 5 weeks." He said, "Why don't you just open and just go straight through?" So he's kind of the author of the enormously long schedule, because he convinced me to try that. And once I got addicted to it, I could never find the courage to shorten it up.
I think he promoted the track a little different, and I think we got more people out of it coming in the stands.
Everything was more mandatory with Terry. You know, you got to do this. This is mandatory. That's mandatory, meaning if you got to bring your cars out for opening day it was mandatory that you had your car on a start-finish line, and just the word mandatory got used more often.
Terry and I had a chat. He would run the drivers' meetings, and after half a dozen drivers' meetings, he had his polarized Ray-Bans on and up there, you know, shouting out his stuff. And I went over to him and I said, "Got to take the glasses off. Everybody thinks you're really mean, you know," whatever word I used. And we laugh about that all the time. You know, he had to soften his stance up a little bit.
I didn't know him, but one thing I liked about him instantly was he seemed to have big plans. And, you know, part of you when you hear that is always, oh boy, you know, because everybody's got big plans, you know. Whether you're going on your first date with a girl or, you know, buying your first car, everything's great.
Speedbowl Scene, a weekly auto racing magazine covering the events at the Waterford Speedbowl. 1995 brings a new management team to the track. During the 1995 racing season, Speedbowl Scene will be covering the race results, in-depth interviews with drivers and crew members, also interviews with track officials covering all the new rules for the 1995 racing season.
One year they had a video guy there. They had, I don't know if you remember, they had big screen TVs on the front stretch and stuff. They actually gave me a TV in the booth that I could play back. Which kind of, yeah, it was kind of neat. Like, oh, let me see that wreck. And that was like one season.
Also new for the 95 season is an on-site instant replay system. Come see the improvements at the Shoreline Oval. So hold on for the fastest half hour in auto racing.
Welcome to the all-new Speedbowl Scene. We're here with 4 of our top modified competitors for 1995 at the Waterford Speedbowl. Bob, why don't we talk about some of these rule changes?
Well, I think it's going to benefit everybody because the rules are more closer to where the other tracks that we run around.
Okay, for those who are not familiar with the rule changes, the modifieds are back to the SK-type modified rule, which would switch the carburetors back from a 4-barrel to a 2-barrel, and the killer clutches have been eliminated from the modified division.
They changed some of the rules in '95. I think when Terry took over, they kind of adapted to Stafford and Thompson with SK rules.
And we knew we'd hear some noise going back to the SK modifieds in '95. And we did talk to the guys about it, but we felt that was a way to go to make the racing better and to increase the car count. Because if you look at the car numbers, the numbers of entrants in '94, the last year the quarterweights there, I think you're going to find it wasn't too good. The guys love running the 4-barrels, but the racing just wasn't real good.
Welcome back to Speedbowl Scene. The Speedbowl crew has been busy preparing for the upcoming season. Look for a completely re-engineered infield, improvements in the concession area, and renovations to the bathrooms. The shows will also change with a much faster pace for events. Expect the racing action to be non-stop with improvements being made in setting up cars for features, quicker returns to racing from cautions, and a drastically reduced intermission.
All the modifieds with radios this season.
I was in North Carolina for the beginning of the '95 season, so when we moved back in July, I came to the track, and that's when I think he started the whole restart box thing. That was new, so I didn't agree with it. But now it kind of works now, but I wasn't a fan when it first started.
Coming around to take the green, where would you take off before he had the
Usually just before the gate, the pit gate, going into 3.
Up next, all the highlights from the Strictly Stock feature event.
Down into turn number 1. Tony keeps an eye on Cook. Cook gets the green flag. He's away, but Gini is now trying to challenge him on the outside. Here comes Belial downtown. Let these boys do battle a little bit, see where he can go, but the pressure's being put on him by the 44 car of Holly. Holly out of Mystic, trying to keep himself right up front with these front runners.
For the strictly stock drivers here at the Waterford Speedbowl, on any given week we've had upwards to 55, 56, 57 cars in the pits. The man standing to my right, Mike Caprio of East Haven, Connecticut, currently stands on the top of the heap. Mike, it must feel pretty good, the type of season you're having so far.
Yeah, it sure does. I can't ask for a better season so far. You know, we had good luck all through the season so far.
Who are the toughest guys in this division to run against? Who are the guys that give you the toughest time each week?
Well, it'd be the 38 and the 27X of Ed Reed Jr.
This year, the competition's real fierce out here. A lot of the guys are, everybody's running real close now.
Going to bid for the lead, the 38 of Bud Keeney, working around the high side of the 1 of Cook. Keeney pulls it off on that start. He had trouble getting into gear. You can see him slamming the shifter back and forth, but the power does prevail.
He was a good racer. He got hooked up with Ray Down and Senior, and they dominated.
I started my rookie year in '95. That year is the year that Terry Eames took over the racetrack. And at that point, what they did was they eliminated the enduro races on Sundays. And what that caused was there was no place for all those cars to go. There was 75, 80 cars for that division. So all they had to do was add a couple of roll bars to them cars, and they became strictly stocks. So we wound up in 95 with cars, 50 of them showing up every week to qualify for 26 spots.
I think that decision was made for a couple of different reasons. One, I thought there was more potential, there was more room in the pits to have more racers on a Saturday night. The Sunday shows, they were like every other Sunday, and they seemed to be a waste of time. There didn't seem to be any bottom line to them. They weren't very well attended. There was a devoted clan of people that wanted to race there, but they were kind of unregulated. The rules were, were kind of messy.
There was no boundaries with that, you know what I mean? You did what you had to do, right or wrong. If it made it go through the corner, you just did it.
I kind of like the idea of a small displacement division. So, if we kind of made something out of this and we could bring it to Saturday night, it might just work. And I discussed it with a few people before we did it. There was definitely interest in racing on Saturday night.
That was amazing. It was like we were part of the big boys. It made that difference to where the crowd on a Saturday night was that much better than a Sunday. We used to race on Sundays.
We qualified them in the afternoon because I would qualify them after the first round of practice. And then they would run their feature at 6 o'clock. They put on some of the best races that we had on any given Saturday night.
The mini stock, you had to be on it. You had to be smooth, and you couldn't break your momentum. You had to keep your speed up.
I mean, once you got going, you were as fast as a Sportsman, but if you lifted off the gas pedal for an instant, you were going backwards. It was just, you had to hold it to the floor, and if you wanted to slow down, you just squeezed the brake a little bit.
Once you broke your speed, it took you another lap and a half, and everybody's driving away from you. The strictly stocks are a little more forgiving. You could throw it in there, pitch it in sideways, get into the side of a guy, and step on the throttle, and it gets you out of trouble.
The first couple of years were pretty good because there were different cars. There were some Nissans and Datsuns, and there was actually a 4-cylinder Camaro, and
there were Volkswagen Rabbits out there. There were every kind of car out there. Then the guys found out that the Mustang was really the car that was easiest to set up and to get it to go around the track.
You used a GT Mustang and stick the 4-cylinder in it, and that was a car to have.
And the Ford 4-cylinder was a pretty bulletproof engine, so that's why I think everybody gravitated to them.
Bruce Thomas Sr. was a heck of a Mustang driver. Uncle Glenn, Father Bruce. Those guys are smart with race cars. And they are Ford fanatics. They still are, to this day.
If you look back, when they had the Enduros on the Sundays, Bruce and Glenn used to dominate.
Who would you consider your toughest competitor in the mini stock?
Bruce Thomas Sr. He's the one who motivated me. He won a lot of races in the Sunday races. I just could not. It was one of those things. I couldn't even win a heat race. And guys come along in the last lap and skunk me out of it, and it just would irk me so bad.
Bruce Thomas Sr., when I raced minis, was definitely the godfather of mini stocks. That's exactly how I felt.
They are really smart with Fords. I will forever be impressed with the way that they can tinker with race cars. And Bruce is a wheelman.
He was the man. He was the fastest guy out there.
I could actually race with him and run with him once we figured it out, and that was pretty satisfying too. They had their stuff together for years. They knew the Mustangs when they started. Everybody else was messing around, experimenting, and they right out of the gate knew what they were doing.
That was the car everybody had, except the Nissan was fast. Carnes was in that car and doing really well.
When I ran a mini stock, I raced out of Carnes's garage. We became pretty close. Jeff taught me how to weld. Very structured. They had their checklists. They were very serious about their racing.
We went out for our first season, and I didn't really have too much help. My dad actually said to me, he said, if you can prove to me that you really want to do this, then I'll give you a hand. So I proved to him, and I think we finished 10th in points that season. And then my dad came on board, a bunch of knowledge from him.
Dan would throw a couple 20s in an envelope and pin it to the wall and say, hey guys, go get McDonald's tonight. That Nissan, they were on top of their game because it was a Mustang world.
Once we got it and we kind of figured it out, it was pretty cool to be a little bit different, and I guessed at my own setup and it worked.
Oh, that's when Dan Donstead and Jeff Cox, they slugged it out for the championship. And that was a good heated competition.
We came out of the gate flying. We won the first race, and it was on. We won a lot of races, and that was really what was on our mind then, was winning races. We hadn't even thought about a championship till later in the season.
About halfway through was the time that it kind of clicked that we were always together. They always started us in the back, and there was full field of minis, and we both would battle right to the front.
Everybody was talking about it because it was 2 points this way, 2 points that way.
We had slight rivalry between us, and which was, I think, makes it even that much more fun to watch.
There was a lot of animosity between us, a lot of talk back and forth, and he was driving a Nissan, I was driving a Ford, so it was that too, I was driving a foreign car, and I mean, we did everything we could to get in each other's heads.
They were both good runners, neither one of them would give an inch. They put out a good show for everybody.
Another thing that kind of blew my mind was when we would go out to race in the minis, all the mod guys and everyone would come up to the fence to watch me and Dan battle. And to have them all crowd up and watch us battle it out, to me was pretty awesome.
With his third place finish, Carnes wins the mini stock championship by 2 points over Dan Darmstadt.
Jeff, congratulations. You're the new mini stock champion for the 1995 season.
Tough year. It was a good battle right down the end. We won the battle, we lost the war, but we'll be back next year.
We were there to win, and we won a lot, but winning that many, I think he won 4 or 5, and I won 11. I mean, how do you not win? And for years, you went back to back, because I did win the following year. And I'm like, no, I didn't win back to back. As hard as it is to relive that, everybody reminds you. We felt like we earned it and didn't get it the year before, and we went back the next year, and there was you weren't going to stop us.
97, Jeff Miller. Him and I battled all year for Rookie of the Year, and he ended up getting it. He was pretty tough.
Jeff Miller was a very smart kid.
There's a lot of them. There's Rob Olowski. He was great. Mike Fernald, great guy, very good driver, not super aggressive, but fast.
We had Jigalewski. They were all smart guys, and they knew how to make a car get around the track.
Did you watch the TV show on Channel 26?
Oh yeah, yeah. What was the sit down, strap in, grab the steering wheel, hang on?
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Speedbowl Weekly. I'm Adele Beth Green along with the Jeff Pearl Fox Hill Racing crew. Stay with us for the next half hour because we'll have all the feature races at the Waterford Speedbowl in Waterford, Connecticut. So, sit down, strap in, and hang on. Speedbowl Weekly is next.
Even though it was campy, was it kind of cool to have?
Yeah, it was. It was, and especially at the time, it was like, again, it was bringing the Speedbowl along helping to bring it along into the mainstream. When we had things like that at the time, I thought that was huge.
On the restart, the top 4 would battle with no one car having a clear advantage. On the last lap, track announcer Ken Witham best describes what happened.
And we've got the Cody machine up high. Rondo right behind him. Brouwer helping the 8 of St. Louis. There goes Cody on the last lap. Takes out Rondo at the line. It's Brouwer at the line. St. Louis got into Cody and I dove in there. Oh, well.
Johnny Brouwer. Do I need to say anything else? That's a character.
It just kind of says it all when you just laugh. He and I pretty much started racing at about the same exact time, if I remember correctly. And I'll never forget, like opening day of, or the first time that I raced or whatever. And I remember him coming off the track. Now, we're both like raw rookies. And I remember him coming off the track and driving past me. I got out of my car and he's driving past and he's like hooting and hollering in the car because he's having like so much fun. And I remember thinking to myself, why can't I be having that kind of fun? Because I'm a ball of stress right now.
A little crazy, come out with fireworks or, you know, on his car, spray paint his tires on a late model.
You know, the kids, of course, loved it, you know, the painted wheels. And
my first all-time favorite driver was definitely Johnny Brouwer. He just was the guy that put on the show. His cars were always, especially as a young kid, he had the Batman car and the multicolor wheels.
John Brouwer Jr.
They did some of the wildest stuff, but he had BROUWERLAND back in the corner.
BROUWERLAND. Everybody went to BROUWERLAND back in the day.
Did you ever go to BROUWERLAND in the pits? That's a good answer.
Maybe.
I'd be up in a tower on a Saturday night in the middle of July with the air conditioner blasting and looking at a freaking Christmas tree on the top of a truck way out in the back of the pits.
I always parked way in the back to be in my own little world or whatever.
He managed to use a pit spot that nobody else wanted because there was the remnants of that old ramp back there where they used to load the race cars.
What it used to be is we used to back the ramp trucks off and unload the cars there. That's why it was there for like the 60s and 50s. And nobody was using it. Brought a weed whacker, chainsaw, cleaned it up.
He had it landscaped. It was next level, not what you would ever expect to see at a racetrack.
It had bushes, it had walkways, it had a miniature golf course, it had a pool.
And you always go over there just for the entertainment. You always had something going on.
Pretty sure he had video games in his trailer, like full stand-up video games.
We had a basketball court. We had Eddie Reed, Tom Fox, Matt Kovaluk. We used to have 2-on-2 basketball games.
I played 2-on-2. I mean, we had battles every week.
Nobody else was doing it, and I just said, why not? To me, the racing was fun, but it was so much time, downtime.
He had that set up back there, and everybody went back, and they might have moaned and groaned about it, but everybody went back there.
I took criticism for letting BROUWERLAND happen, you know? And I never got that because to me it was like, this is like so organic and so real and something that just didn't happen everywhere.
Nobody has a personality like that anymore.
Everybody sort of patterns their operation around big-time cup racing.
Everybody's cookie cutter, you know, gotta say the right thing. BROUWERLAND was the best.
He brought the party to the racetrack. It was always fun and colorful when Johnny was there.
I'd get a set of fireworks or something, or an air horn. I mean, it was like your hat. People were giving me hats to wear. You know, it was cool. It's like a relationship that I made with the fans was, what was Johnny gonna do now?
I remember they were on the podium or whatever, and I stuck a picture in through the fence, and he signed it for me. I still got that picture today, which is really cool.
The sport could use more Johnnies. It needed more Johnny Brouwers back then, and it still needs more Johnny Brouwers today.
Entertaining. That's what racing is entertaining. You know, I had fun, I raced decent, and had fun doing it. You know, I did it my way.
Carnes would lead the field back to the line alongside the 39 of John Brouwer Jr. The pair would battle side by side with Brouwer finally getting the top spot at the line.
We had 20 top fives out of 25 races. You know, they made the big stink, let me and Rondo fight it out or whatever, and I had no idea I had a prayer in the world. Lap 39, that's my car number, by the way, Rondo breaks, and it's like, whoa, you know, maybe. And I passed Rob Janovic, I passed Louis Belial, and then there's Jay Stewart in front of me. And I says, no, I'm staying right here. And good thing I did, I finished second, and I won by 6 points.
I'm not even sure how Tom and I even became friends. I think it goes back when he was driving Tommy Goodrow's car. He used to win a ton of races, and his cars were always different than everybody else's, and I think that's what attracted me to Tom's program.
It's a friendship that I had formed in the late 70s.
Al had, obviously, Dick Dunn's 3-car, Al and Peg did. And I knew Tom since he was 5 or 6 years old. We kind of grew up as, we called each other brothers even though we weren't. So I've known him, close to them for quite a while. Tom had some sort of back issues. He had some medical thing going on, and the doctor told him that he really shouldn't race. And he called me up. He was racing he'd moved to the late model division from street stocks, where he won some races. He had a pretty good program going, and asked if I'd drive his car. I said, I'll drive for you, but I want a brand new car. I want a brand new motor. I went through the whole deal. I liked him, but I wanted to be picky. And he said, okay, and he hung up, and he called me back a week later and said his dad was on board. They already ordered a motor. So of course I said, okay, well, so we built a brand new race car. We started off slow. The brand new car that we built, I think the 3rd week we won, but I was struggling with it. And Tom's car from the year before, we ended up just putting the good motor in that car and trying that, and then we peeled off like 6 wins in the last half of the year. The old car, I specified I wanted a new one. The old one was the one that we liked. Yeah, of course.
On the restart, Dockenhausen would get the early jump, but the 3 of Fox would power by on the high side to take over the top spot.
And how'd you get started doing this?
My mom and dad my uncle used to race years ago when I was a little kid.
Alan's mom, Emma, she was a great, fun to watch driver, and obviously raised her kids up to be around the racing.
Back in '96, when Alan drove the Interstate Batteries car in the street stocks, he had 9 wins.
My dream that I never thought it would ever come true was doing it, and I worked on that car every single night.
13 wins. Killed it that season.
My last really great race car that I think I built and owned was my '93 car that I won a lot of races in, and I won the Race of Champions in it. And I sold my '93 car to Matt Kobaluk. And if you look, Matt Kobaluk won 8 or 9 races in that same race car. He had his best years at the bowl in that thing. There was something about that car. It went really good.
Matt was fast, but he was pretty aggressive when we used to race.
2 laps remaining. Kobaluk giving it all. He's got on the outside. It's the long way around the track. Not necessarily the fast one, but Kobaluk sticking there mighty fine. Brouwer still staying on the inside, holding that groove. Then it's the 51 of Rob Janovic. Gets a bump. Looked like Brouwer both losing it in turns number 4.
I don't remember him that much. I remember seeing him there. It's a unique name, so it sticks in your ear. It's not a Johnson or a Smith or, it's Kobaluk. It's spelled a little bit different. But, a lot of guys that make great touring racers didn't necessarily make great weekly racers. It's a different style of racing. He's obviously had a terrific career with the, with whatever that series was called at the time, Maybe had he stayed at the Speedbowl longer, he might have put the numbers up there. A lot of times the guy leaves just when he's hitting his stride, and we all saw him maybe as not being ready to leave, but it turns out he was exactly ready to leave. That's when the stride was hit. We just didn't see him at stride, on Saturday nights.
Tell me how you got started in racing.
Oh, way back. We've been running since 1963 or 4, I think it was. I ran at Plainville Stadium, and I had a lot of different drivers, a lot of them. I could write a book about all my drivers, too. I took 2 track championships, one at Plainville Stadium and one at right here at Waterford. And so Eric wants to give it a try, and he was a good and a quarter midget, so we'll see what he can do.
We always parked next to the 54 car when Teddy was driving it. And I think Phil Rondo drove it for a while. And we always knew Eric was the kid that he was gonna, when he turned 15 or 16, he was gonna start racing.
Kind of at that time, it was unheard of for someone to go from a quarter midget to a modified.
He was one of the first ones to start that young.
Usually they were in their late 20s when they finally got into the modified division, because you wanted people in your cars that were going to handle them right.
If you dig deep enough into the rumor mill, he may have even been 15 when he started racing that modified.
I was 15 years old. No driver's license, obviously, at the time. They had a scheduled 2 weeks worth of warm-ups before the blast-off. So we're going to forge my birth certificate so we can get down there to practice. So it's the first practice by myself, and I can remember being out there, wow, this is different than what I'm used to, a quarter midget.
The rookie driver, 16-year-old Eric Berndt, Berndt, Connecticut, at North State.
Being 16, a well-established car that had multiple feature wins, had great drivers in it beforehand.
Starting off racing, I can't stress how much it helps you to get into a car that's already fast. To be in the best of equipment, it makes you look good. Not that you don't have talent, because it takes both. And Eric had definitely some talent.
Just a lot of natural talent, I think. It didn't take him long to pick it up. I think they threw him right in a modified. So, throw him to the wolves. But picked it up pretty fast.
David Gada finished second to me, which was probably a blessing, being that as polite of a driver as he is, to put it lightly. We had a car definitely capable of winning, but I kept overdriving it and driving in harder every lap and slide up the track. So I kept opening the door for him to sneak on the bottom, but we had enough motor to pull off the corner that it would close the hole.
I rooted for him. Yeah. When you're a young kid, you want to see a young kid win.
With me is 17-year-old Eric Berndt. Eric's been racing for 2 years total. Last year, he won his first feature, and this year, on April 27th, he won his second feature.
At the Speedbowl, the first year was an experience, because I don't think I was very well liked at first. Being that young and having that much behind me, I got flipped the bird quite a few nights.
Eric Berndt would claim the top spot for a time, working past Ceravolo on an early race restart. With 2 to go, something would break in Berndt's car, turning the lead over to Ceravolo, who would battle with Donnie Fowler over the final 2 circuits.
Who would you consider was your biggest rival during your career at Speedbowl?
Todd Ceravolo. We started racing the same year together.
A controversial spin on lap number 13 involving point leader Ceravolo in the number 31, and the 71 of Jeff Burrow would bring out yet another caution.
We raced hard together. I mean, extremely hard.
We went through a run of like 2 or 3 seasons where every week we would wreck each other. He would feel that I did him wrong, or I would feel he did me wrong. We'd go to a different track and it would just like carry, we went to Riverside Park and, he felt that I roughed him up when I passed him, and and 3 laps later, he ends up wrecking me.
Jeff Burrow, with car number 71, ended up with the worst damage.
Hot Rod Todd, when I first started, he was one that definitely liked to flip the bird a lot.
Hot Rod Todd Ceravolo was intense.
Kind of like Teddy Christopher. The bumpers and Nerf bars.
Todd, fierce competitor.
Definitely a fierce competitor. Fierce.
I remember back, when I was 10 years old and sitting in them grandstands, just in a maze. And how could I get on that side of the fence? It seemed like something that was so impossible to do.
There was a short time at the Speedbowl where you had a whole bunch of the sons of some of these famous drivers racing, and that was another really interesting period. You had Tucker Reynolds Jr., you had Ceravolo's kid, Eric Berndt was running there. the Gadas. Yeah, it was a really interesting time.
'97, we led the points for quite a bit. Todd was right there. Todd, I think, took it back over.
That was just relentless. Every week it was Tucker and me, Tucker and me. I had an amazing season, and so did he.
Real proud to be a part of that year.
And then the last race of the season rained out.
I never got a chance to see if we could gain that 20-some-odd points that we needed. But we're part of a great story of '97. It was an epic battle, and I enjoyed being part of it.
He had some really good years where he went real good there.
He was a talented driver. Tucker was a guy to beat on many nights.
He always had one of the best looking cars. You know, he's always had a wild design.
You know, I tried real hard to give the fans the show that they came to, you know, they bought a ticket for.
Tucker, I remember he had a string of years where he won a lot of races. He came on like fire, and then all of a sudden he disappeared.
He was obviously good and he had success, and then just got out.
I'd like to introduce you to 26-year-old Jeff Pearl from Colchester.
We didn't start off looking for the championship. It just, we had a season that turned out to be so consistent. We were finishing, you know, in the top 5 every week, so it put tires on the car. I think we only had 2 wins that season, but we were consistent.
Is your father part of your pit crew as well?
When he doesn't have much work to do to his car, he'll be over helping us or influencing and always giving us the little extra edge on, with his experience.
My father worked hard helping me out, and, I was glad he was there to be part of it. And if you go to any other tracks, there's not too many father-son combinations that can say they both won the championship in the same division.
Once I got with Gordon, it was good because we both had the same kind of ideas. I mean, we got along great.
No one's going to catch him, and for the second time this year, off turn 4, checkered flag is out, and Ron Juhasz takes down the race win.
Father always fielded a car there. That's what keeps the place going.
Ronnie Sr.'s been a Speedbowl forever.
Yeah, I mean, he was stout in long distance races.
Straight up, in their prime, in a mini stock, Bruce Sr., Bruce Jr., who's winning?
Bruce Sr. is going to go into a lazy spin coming off a 2, so Jr. is going to walk away with the win.
I was looking for things that we could do at the Speedbowl that other tracks couldn't do.
The New England Dodge Dealers Legends Tour is another affordable way to get started in stock car racing. Last weekend, they ran down at the Waterford Speedbowl. We spoke to some of the Legends competitors.
Well, the cars are set on a tube chassis with a fiberglass body to look like the old style modifieds. Each body style is a little bit different, but they're styled after the old modified coupes from the early 60s, 5-window coupes, that kind of stuff to make them look like the old style modified.
But it was guys like Frank Manafort,
John Manafort, Jags Palmer.
He went out to Arizona, and then we came back. He found out they were made in Charlotte. Like I said, I worked there, so he wanted to take a ride to Charlotte. So like 8 of us jumped in a dually, went down and bought 2 cars. As we bought them, they said you could take them out back and try them if you want. So they had that little 5th mile out back at Charlotte. So we were all out there, everybody. All 8 of us were driving them. So they bought 2 more cars. Jackie Arute found out about it, so he bought a car. We ended up buying 6 cars right off the bat. And then the way that works with the Legends, if you buy 6 cars, you become a dealer. But Jackie took the dealership because it was Stafford.
And I had become friendly with Jack Arute, who had teamed up with the Manaforts to kind of be the first promoter of the Legends cars, you know, largely centered around Stafford. But he was trying to get races at other tracks.
And then when Terry found out, Terry, you know, invited us down there.
You know, I have a little bit of a background in sports car racing where all the cars are identical, and it eliminates the, you know, spending more money than the other guy, kind of makes it a driver's division.
He brought the Legend cars down. It was in Jackie Arute was actually driving one.
Trying to get into this deal. He's trying to take the shortest way around this Waterford
It had some kind of sports car roots for me. And I like the idea of spec racing, thinking that we'd attract a different kind of family.
And the Legends were so different then because it seemed like it was all older guys that wanted to race and have some fun, and it was cheap.
You can't afford to race a modified, get a Legend car. If you're an old modified guy or even an old modified fan and you wanted to try racing, you get a Legend car. And I had a bunch of people that did that.
It started out as being not a youth division, but really a gentleman's way to go racing.
They had a lot of guys from Long Island who came. I mean, that's why the Legends were always first on Saturday nights, so they could get on the ferry.
There was a guy by the name of Danny McNamara that used to run a modified out at Riverhead. And a couple guys that were like him that had raced, you know, years ago and then kind of gotten out of it and then gotten back in it.
Great guy, great driver. Happy Irishman.
Didn't necessarily see it as a youth thing. I thought it would be more older people.
Totally different now where it's kids trying to move up. Well, these were old guys trying to move down.
Back then, I was the young kid, believe it or not. I was in my 40s.
A driver got out, and I forget who it was, but the driver got out of the car and said, "This is like Talladega for a full-size car." You know, they'd just gone faster in that Legends car.
One Thursday night race, we had 3 76s fighting for the freaking. We were all right there slamming it out.
The best Legend car driver that I saw at the bowl might surprise you who he is. Chris Pastriak. All his wins would come from behind. They could put him at the Crystal Mall, and he would, at lap number 20, he would be there.
And the Legends cars weren't there at the Speedbowl every Saturday night. They were a little more of a purpose-built race car, and they did run at a few different tracks, so it just kind of seemed like a neat deal. My first car, we ended up getting that from Sean Buffington, because he was looking to move up, so my father sold Sean and Tom one of his old cars as a roller. So Sean ended up running that car he ended up running at Thompson as an SK. And then we kind of worked a deal where we ended up with one of his Legends cars.
Sean Buffington, he was a pretty good competitor.
Sean was a good kid, good driver.
You know, when all the young guys were coming into the Legends, replacing the guys from Long Island who used to come in on the ferry, the young guys invaded the place.
That was my first year racing for Jeff Head Insurance. And before I raced for him, I had good cars here and there. I was newly married, really couldn't afford to get into it fully. And one day he comes up and says, "Can you test drive my car for me? Tell me what's going on." So I got in his car and come out of the car, and he said, "Well, I guess I'm not driving no more. You want to race for me?"
Back in '96, I was helping a guy named Donnie Berg, a good friend of mine. He was my neighbor, a good friend. He said, come help me with this guy. So I started going to the Speedbowl, and I didn't know really nothing about it, and just started going there, getting interested, and I was always a gearhead during my high school years. So I was like, let me drive this thing. It's like, no way, you can't drive it. I'm like, I'm going to buy a car. So that's kind of how it started for me. And I went out and bought a car in 96, late 96. Didn't really do anything with it. We made the last 2 races of the season. Didn't qualify. There was 45, 50 cars there. We kind of just rode around and learned a few things.
He'd get a car, and he was all over the place. And I always had the mindset, if someone's fast, but they're in the way, and they're racing you hard, and it's kind of making it tough for you to help them out. Boy, was that a mistake.
Moose actually helped me quite a bit, getting the car going in the right direction, then he kind of stopped helping me. I was wondering why.
Moose and Corey in the Strictly, when I first started running, we used to run at 6 o'clock. And we lived close enough, we'd load the car up, bring it home while they ran their heats, and we'd come back and sit in the grandstands hooting and hollering and watching these guys.
I did see them 2 battle. Moose and Corey were hardcore and very good drivers. Probably about the best racing.
They didn't mind using the fender a little bit. I mean, it was great racing.
We had some good battles, you know. We had some good knockdown, drag out races.
Racing for Jeff Hedden, it was nice to get into some equipment that was really good.
I honestly liked racing with Corey. I don't know if it's because we had a lot of respect for each other or what, but he was one of the guys that you could go out there and be alongside of. He'd race you hard, but he'd give you a lane. He wouldn't give you no more than you needed, but he wouldn't put you in the wall either. So I had a lot of fun racing with Corey.
Eddie and I went down neck and neck through the last race of the year, and I actually overtook him to win the title.
We've always had a good competition between the 2 of us. We've never deliberately taken each other out. We race each other hard. And Corey's top notch. He's a great driver.
Moose and I always battled hard together. We've made each other mad a few times, I'm sure. I got thrown out of a race because I hit somebody on the caution. At the time, I was so mad, it didn't really faze me, but my temper got the best of me on that one.
Ed was different, and he made it work. He was like that guy who tried something different all the time, but he was a heavy hitter. Car's all jacked up like a funny car. We used to laugh at it, but the thing would fly, What's he got in that thing?
Back down to the stripe as the white flag goes in the air this time. Ted Dupree is going to try to score his first victory of the 2000 season. He'll work off turn number 2 for the final time. Back straightaway. Can anybody get around the Dupree machine? Well, here they come off. Turn 4 down to the checkered flag. It's Ted Dupree over Scott Sousa, Sean Monahan.
Terry took over. Mark Gear was the race director. Tony was on the flag stand.
The starter changed. Naturally, he didn't want Corey back, and the announcer changed. Joe Golis did not come back.
I was like the chief steward in the south pit, with all the modifieds.
Is it safe to say that becoming a race director, it stopped being fun to go to the races for you then?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I wasn't in the pits anymore, which I enjoyed. I wasn't with the cars. You know, I was up there just the racing part, not with the cars.
It's not an easy job. No matter what happens, people think you're showing favoritism. And then Tony wound up becoming the race director. And Terry approached me prior to doing that and asked if I would be willing to go on a flag stand as the chief starter. I said, I would love to.
Terry called me beginning of the following season, says, hey, I want you to come and work for me. I said, why me? And he gives me this crack like, oh, you gotta hire a cheater to catch a cheater. I'm like,
for whatever reason, Tony left, and I took over as the acting race director.
Billy Roberts, he wanted to do something different and put a spotter at both ends of the track, turn 2, turn 4. So that's when I got out of the tech deal and became the turn 4 spotter. It's all right, we kind of changed the game a little bit with that.
There's a guy that got on my team early on that the track would not have survived that era had Billy not been part of the team. You know, not only was he great with the racers, whether on the flag stand or as a pit steward, you know, and then ultimately race director, but he also was my Mr. Fix-It. The place was very neglected, and he did electrical and plumbing and carpentry, and he just solved more technical problems. The guy can fix anything. There are several people that played key roles in making what I still view as a success of my tenure there as a promoter. We could talk about the unsuccessful portions later if you want, but one of the reasons why it worked as well as it did was because of people who were willing to help me. And I think to some degree my willingness to accept their help. Pete Zanardi is high on that list, probably the most significant.
Friday nights I was running the press box at Stafford. And then Saturday nights I was running the press box at Waterford.
So he worked for Stafford at the time I took over Waterford. He would offer me advice, write some things for me, not put his name on them. It got noticed a little bit more that he was doing it. I think that helped end his relationship at Stafford. And then he came on board and worked with us almost full time for a number of years.
You know, I think the popularity of the bull in the 90s, Pete Zanardi has to be given a lot of credit for it because he had a lot of friends in the writers, and there was a full press box every week. The New London Day, Norwich Bulletin.
You understand one thing, it was Terry's racetrack. So whatever success or failure went on while I was there, it was Terry's team to run.
He was there right from the beginning, and an absolute devoted friend of the track, and a devoted friend of mine. And you know, we not only did good work, but we had real fun along the way, and I miss that a great deal.
Let's face it. I mean, the Speedbowl and all of us there, we were always like playing second fiddle to Thompson and Stafford.
And I never saw the track as being, that we had to compete with Stafford. I thought the place was unique. I mean, I de-emphasized the town it was in and called it the Speedbowl more than I called it Waterford, and I really wanted to play on its uniqueness. So nobody was doing a big race for SKs.
The birth of the Budweiser Modified Nationals, the 200 laps, that was Tony Leckie.
I'm the one that came up with the format for that show. And we were talking about some of the old midweek shows, Yankee All-Star shows, the Modified Madness shows at Stafford. And I said, you know something, wouldn't it be neat? The guys are always complaining that nothing is done for the SK division. How about, would it be neat if we could put on a Modified Madness type show or Yankee All-Star type show for the SKs and bump the purse up? Say pay 10 grand to win or 5 grand to win. You imagine how many cars we'd get.
I remember exactly the meeting and telling Tony Leckie, you know, you're something's not hitting, Tony. You're not, you know, you better go check your distributor because you're not firing on all 8 here. And I'm thinking we were in the press box when we were talking about it, because certainly that construction trailer wasn't there. So I'm thinking we might have been in the press box talking about it.
Well, we hammered it out and we talked about it. And then we're in the office. We had one of our meetings and presented the idea to Terry.
Tony was always a big race proponent, all right? So I think you really have to say it was Tony's idea, and then the two of them pitched it to me.
He convinced Terry before he convinced me.
They knew I was right for that. I mean, I wanted to put the Speedbowl on the map.
It was a big deal. It was a big race. It was something nobody else was doing. Terry put a lot of money up.
We landed on this $5,000 win, which should have been all the money for SK racers.
I'm pretty sure that was like the first time that it was going to be big money.
Ecstatic. Yeah. That was a lot of money then for an SK. Yeah. We were excited.
It was really kind of revolutionary. It was time trials. And I remember saying, running around, asking people, like Brouwer, when's the last time they ran time trials here?
I hate time trials. But everybody wanted them.
The format was different for the SK division.
Didn't they give like a 10-minute break?
Yeah, I think that was our format. I think the first year we did competition caution at 100 laps.
I really didn't think it could possibly work.
Why not?
I just thought it was just a very, very big thing to chew on. And Leckie's point was, let's do it. Let's really be big. Let's knock them over.
I think Pennzoil was the first sponsor for that event.
We did everything in our power to be the fastest car in time trials that day.
I recall waiting in line that day, and the guys were going out there. I'm hearing the lap times. Just see if you can give me a place to turn this thing around and put it back in the trailer. There's no point in me being here because these guys are just killing us out there.
Honestly, I mean, as I'm sitting in the lineup getting ready to go out, and I start hearing these low 14s coming about, and then I think Don Fowler clicked off like a 14.09 or something. I'm like, oh God, that's faster than we've been.
I turned a decent lap, but I thought I left a lot on the table. So I drove up onto the scales, and congratulations, said, oh, what? You're on the pole. Yeah, sure enough. I thought maybe they had something going on with the scoreboard that kind of messed up. And then guy after me come out and pushed me back to second, and Tucker come out and pushed me back to third.
I was on the starter stand with the clock, and I'm looking at some of these laps, and when I saw Tucker's lap, I'm like, I'm going to say on the radio exactly what the box says.
We got done doing the lap, and I pull on in. I can't hear the announcer. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what I just did. How or whatever the number came up, I couldn't tell you.
When we found out how fast he was, first thought was, all right, bullshit. There's no way.
Yeah, that was absolutely.
You think that time was legit?
No. Unfortunately, Tucker, no.
Do you think Tucker's car was that fast?
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah, we still talk about that.
Yeah.
When it's mentioned today, I don't think that really happened.
There was something with the timing device. Everybody was a full second faster than what the actual time was.
Apparently, from all accounts, the clock was off by a second. I don't know that to be a fact. I just read the numbers off, period. With the timing equipment that we had that day.
Honestly, looking back into, there's controversy. We didn't think there was any controversy. We were quick.
But did he maybe have I don't know. Maybe it was the 15 flat. who knows? But yeah, for back then, that time really wasn't feasible.
They should have gave him a different time, gave him the pole, but gave him a different time because it was just unbelievable.
I'm proud as heck to hold on to a sub 14 lap. Whether some say that the devices were not doing it right, well, if they weren't, they were doing it for everybody.
He was awarded it, and so be it, Not to take anything away from him, it wouldn't be his fault.
I've been getting slapped in the face with that number since 1997. It just won't die.
Oh, that was big. To win a race like that with that kind of money is like, holy cow,
And we shortened it at some point.
We led from green to checkered, had multiple people behind us that were putting up a strong fight, Teddy being one of them, Dennis Gada being another one. I think both of them were side by side and ended up wrecking with each other.
They're all chasing down the young man from Meriden. His name is Eric Berndt. He's led wire to wire so far. Here's Christopher spinning around, out at turn number 3, makes contact with a wall. Gada goes around 2.
Towards the end of the race, we had Eddie Reed putting a lot of pressure on us.
And it's Eric Berndt up front, Ed Reed in second. These two cars will decide the race. Down the back straight, they'll work into 3. One more shot for Ed Reed. Off for 4. Who's it gonna be? Reed to the outside. Spins. Berndt will win the race.
We ended up all 150, collected all the lap money.
And we were paying lap money for that race too.
I think it ended up being like $8,072, something like that. And at that time, obviously, it was the biggest payday anybody's took out of, especially an SK.
The first race I announced was the Budweiser Modified National in 2002. And I remember Ed Reed dominating the first half of the race, hitting for tires, and then he never got the lead back. Eric Berndt took over and dominated the second half of the race.
Yeah, that was exciting. It was the most money I ever won.
I think the thing that turned that race around was the time when Teddy won the midget race, then won the modified race, then was disqualified, and it got a ton of publicity for the wrong reason. It took them, and I still am very mad about this, it took them forever to disqualify Teddy that day. And so the Current and the Day and the Bulletin all had people there, all ran the story that Teddy won the race, right? So finally they disqualified him, and it was just a tremendous chore on my part to try to get to all of these people and say he didn't win the race, he was disqualified. But the car sat there, I bet you, for an hour and 20 minutes. For that hour and a half, right? We had a guy that just won a midget race and a modified race. Right now, we're not talking about a late model race and a modified race, right? We're talking about 2 totally different kinds of race cars, right? This was like a really, really big story, and enough of it got out. So, and I always thought that the fact that Teddy was disqualified is the thing that made that race.
The first time I went to the Speedbowl, 1999, the Budweiser Modified Nationals. Now, in 98, Teddy won the race, but was disqualified, and Burt Marvin won. So Teddy, for a year, was saying how he wanted to take Terry Eames' money, that he owes him, he's going to take it.
Oh, what's it about this race here at Waterford?
I like taking Terry's money.
So the race was scheduled on a Sunday. However, Riverside Park had their opener the week before. It got rained out. So they rescheduled it to that week. So it looked like Teddy, who had a tour rider stuff, wasn't going to be able to compete at the bowl. Terry Eames had a friend who owned a limousine service. He arranged for a limousine to come and take Ted and his crew from Riverside to Waterford, and they held up the race for him. So I was on that limo. Teddy tells the driver to pull over. We go to David's place. He said, before I take Terry's money, I got to have some ice cream. And then we went down there, and he did his only Budweiser Modified National win.
Did you think that event was a success when it was over?
The first year, I remember, wasn't all that successful, I don't think.
I was very disappointed.
Really? How come?
In fact, I was probably the most disappointed person on that management team. I mean, Terry was even saying, you know, everything's good. We're good. We're good.
It was okay. I mean, it was a success. I mean, it was a success PR-wise, and we didn't lose money. So it got us in the fulfillment business. You know, we had inflatables, and you know, we had the whole festive atmosphere going with the Bud Mod Nats, and you know, we learned a lot as a group about how to promote a big race.
I first expected a lot more support from the drivers. I expected more cars.
I thought it was interesting that it paid as much as it did, and I thought everybody would show up for this event, and it kind of didn't.
I really, really expected to get at least 40 cars for that show. There were a lot of SKs around back then. And I think we ended up with a final count of 29. Maybe my expectations were too high, but I was devastated by that number.
I really thought something that paid that well would get a lot more guys to show up for it, and I was surprised that more of the big names didn't find a way to get there.
We promoted it with the Stafford guys, with the Thompson guys, you know, with the Mod Tour guys.
I remember promoting the big race, and I'm out at the auto parts show in Indianapolis. I'm chatting with Reggie Ruggiero, and I'm talking about this big race we have coming up. And he says, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that race. And then it was a cocktail party, and about an hour later, he comes back. He says, hey, that race you were telling me about. Yeah, he says, that's an SK race? I said, yeah. He says, oh, I don't do SK races. You know, I mean, the touring guys were running modifieds, you know, and so we really thought that there was a market there. It just didn't pan out.
I was also a little disappointed with the crowd turnout.
It was always cold.
I wouldn't call it cold, but it was chilly.
It seemed like whenever we ran that race on Saturday, we would have great weather. And then Sunday would just be terrible. And so the crowds would stay away.
Whether we had a weather threat or not, probably we had a weather threat at every opener.
I thought it was going to be a huge hit. You know, we're going to get 1,000 people show up to race in the car. And I was always surprised that there was never really a large turnout for that.
But it never really materialized to be the big draw that it should be. It should have been. My goal was to be there for 95 and 96. 97 came, they convinced me to stay another year. 98, I had down payment money on buying a business for myself when the owners came to me and said, we heard you were going to go do that. How about you lease it from us and run it yourself? And I said, I'll do that if you give me an option to buy it. So I leased it starting in 98. And then, you know, it took me until September of 2000 to put together a deal to be able to buy it.
Terry really had some big ideas for that racetrack. One of them was to be a NASCAR racetrack. And that was pretty much why he hired me, to prove that we were worthy of being a NASCAR racetrack.
Getting NASCAR back there had been a goal that went back to 1989. I mean, John Holstein would say, try to get NASCAR back there, try to get NASCAR back there, try to get NASCAR back there.
We had just made ourselves pains in the asses with NASCAR, look at us, right? Look at us. Look at what we're doing here. Look at the field we got. Look at the number of competitors we've got.
And I would annually, make my pitch to get Waterford back into the good graces with NASCAR.
He felt that with the other two racetracks in Connecticut, both being NASCAR, that's what we had to be.
You know, Stafford and Thompson were always NASCAR tracks.
And so I was already friendly with this guy who was a short track operator, now working for NASCAR, Tom Deary, and he was the guy in charge. And he knew the timing of when Riverside was going to close. And it was a very sensitive thing.
Riverside Park would have still been running, but Six Flags come in there and put that great big roller coaster in there, and that ended the racetrack.
And then when NASCAR left Riverside, people say that's how we got the sanction. I think if you talk to Terry, Terry will say we were getting it anyway.
We would, yeah. We had that commitment. We just had to be silent about it. And then they announced, you know, about 2/3 of the way through the season, they announced that would be their last season. We already had the sanction in the bag.
And it took us 5 years before we finally got that sanction.
Terry had a big promotion thing where we went to, they had a big presentation with the newspapers and stuff.
I made a deal to get the sanction, and basically it was part of a move to just grow their list of tracks nationally. You know, that's what they wanted to do.
Let's not forget that, you know, that was coming on the heels of, you know, the NASCAR explosion.
It was more and more popular on TV.
NASCAR was being accepted as part of, you know, the big sports. So you could go to your bosses and say, well, it's NASCAR, you know, and they were kind of like, well, if it's NASCAR, let's do it. And that was part of the reason why we did make the decision to go cover racing there full time, because of that NASCAR sanction.
It does a few things. I mean, it helps keep the overhead down as far as you can piggyback on group insurances and things like that. In addition to making things slightly easier for the promoter, it does register with people who maybe aren't like us, who don't know much about racing, but they know that word. You know, they hear NASCAR and they hear that, you know, the local track is NASCAR sanctioned. You know, I don't see where it can hurt.
In 2000, when Terry got the NASCAR sanction, that was absolutely incredible. I felt it brought us to a next level, a national level, and also for our sponsors at that time, to me, meant a huge deal.
I was kind of excited. I wished that when I won the championship, NASCAR was involved, because it would have paid a lot more money and you would have gotten more recognition. It was nice when you went out to try to approach somebody as far as sponsorship, because everybody heard of NASCAR. And as soon as you said NASCAR, people would kind of, you know, sit up and listen a little bit.
When I would put together my sponsorship proposals, of course, it's always nice to run into every local business and say, hey, I'm racing on a NASCAR track.
Now it's not just a local track. Now it's NASCAR. And to put that sticker on the side of my race car, I remember exactly the day that I did it, and it made me feel kind of like we accomplished something, and now we're next level race car drivers.
I remember it was a huge deal to me. We were all really excited. It's prestigious to have the name behind you.
That was exciting. That was a big deal. All of a sudden, be part of NASCAR. It's bigger than life.
2000 was great. I was super excited to see, you know, NASCAR come to track.
For me, at that time in my life, it was bragging rights. Bragging rights for people who weren't into racing to say, hey, come check out a NASCAR track.
And it was, for a couple of years, it really seemed to help.
When they went NASCAR again, it seemed to generate interest or something. There just seemed to be, after a little while, quite a few more people at the racetrack.
You can see how some of the guys in the lower divisions that don't really get any benefit out of it would maybe feel slighted.
You know, everybody's got different opinions about this.
The NASCAR banner didn't really play any effect for me. It was nice flying the banner and saying you run at a NASCAR track, but it didn't bring anything of any importance, maybe just a little elegance.
NASCAR, I don't think attracts any more sponsors than it not being sanctioned.
I mean, it was nice because some of us thought that we'd get more notoriety because of it, but I don't know if we did.
I was like, okay, you know, it's NASCAR, right? Now we got to pay extra money and hopefully we get something out of it.
The guys always thought that it would give them more voice. I always thought it would just cost them more to race.
I don't know. I think it costs everybody money.
To me, it is what it is. I go out there to race, whether NASCAR sanctions it or USAC, whatever, you know.
Everybody wants to be a part of NASCAR, you know. I mean, here I say it's take it or leave it, but I've had a license since '87.
By the time you buy your licensing and all that stuff, it just adds more cost to the racing.
it was nice saying you were involved with NASCAR, but I mean, I didn't see any real change. I'm not racing at Phoenix this weekend because of it.
I thought it would be great. I know there was people that in the immediacy thought, oh, this is going to ruin it. It's going to take a lot away from it. But I didn't see any negatives. I didn't see how it was going to hurt them at all, because at that point, that brand name was so valuable. It was gold in the sport.
When Riverside closed up, we knew that we were going to benefit. We were hoping we were going to benefit from those drivers coming down. They had the trucks up there.
They were late models with truck bodies on them.
We tried to make a division that was so everybody could run.
That was an attempt to try to find a way to, say, hey, guys, you don't have a home there anymore. You have a home here.
It was kind of interesting to see those guys out there at the same time.
The truck guys, they were a nice bunch of guys, but their trucks weren't as fast as our cars, and they were hard to see around.
I was really skeptical about those trucks when we raced against them because they were tall and our cars were so low.
Looking at the back of that truck, it was like looking at a billboard.
It made our local late model racers upset, and the truck guys that came down from Riverside, they didn't think it was a fair rule, and nobody was happy with it.
They were a little bit slower than us, so they were kind of a pain. There's only 3 of them, but as they got wrecked, they didn't come back. So
they faded away.
What's the phrase? If I only knew then what I know now. What you find out is that when tracks close, the sport loses racers. People only to compete or to spectate. People only go X number of miles with regularity. Okay. So, I mean, there are people that used to go to Danbury weekly that still occasionally go to the Speedbowl or still occasionally go to Stafford. But they're not every week because it's, when you get past 25 or 30 miles, people are just not willing to do it week in and week out. Remember I told you that the Speedbowl and Seekonk got the sanction in the same year. So I see Seekonk being talked about as a third mile. It had always been a quarter. But when they became NASCAR, it became a third. I said, whoa up. You could drop that whole place inside my infield. Okay? So if they're a third, we're something bigger because we were always promoted as a third. So I said, Billy Roberts, get on with NASCAR, figure out how they're measuring these things. He talked to NASCAR. They said, you can measure it 2 or 3 different ways. You measure it, you tell us what you are by one of those methods, and we're going to take your word for it. So I think the method, he went out there with a wheel several times, and I think the method was 10 feet off the wall. So 10 feet in from the outer wall, what does that measure? They're not going to make it be anything in between a third or 3/8. So whatever it's closer to, they're going to round up or down. So that number that he came up with rounded up to 3/8 in this NASCAR nomenclature. It never would have been looked into if Seekonk had just continued to be a quarter.
First of all, it's a third mile. Despite what you people want to tell me, it's a third mile.
Terry was promoter of the year. And Terry was always a great promoter, in my opinion. He always had great ideas and always willing to try something different. We're the only racetrack you go to where the scoreboard counts down. That's the kind of guy he thought outside of the box.
Well, I had started to become a little bit more of an enthusiast about the history of things.
There was a fan vote to try to get the 50 favorite drivers.
Part of our whole 50th anniversary celebration.
We try to do a lot of different stuff. We came out with the book.
We did a special logo, implemented the NASCAR 50th anniversary. I mean, we were really on our game at that point.
Having the guys out on the front stretch was just fantastic.
First off, before our top 50 vote getters.
It was really a who's who of the whole history.
It was voted on by the fans, so that was kind of cool.
That made me feel good. You know, you like to get a little pat on the back once in a while, you know, and make you feel good.
Master of the modifieds, Mr. Bob Potter.
Bob Potter was on that list, and Ted Christopher.
It's Mr. Teddy Christopher. It's Mr. Big Mike Jaganalt. It's Wild Bill Slater. Brian McCarthy. Mr. Jeff Pearl.
That was kind of a shock. My dad was on the same list.
Jeff and Jerry, I mean, just Mark Lajeunesse, good guys.
Mr. Mark Lajeunesse.
I was and still am very honored to be part of that group.
None of us are here without them.
Charlie Webster. Dick Beauregard. Mr. Walt Dombrowski. Mr. Dickie Ceravolo. Mr. Ed Moody. Mr. Fred Fuzzy Bear. It's Mr. Bob Gada Sr.
It was pretty cool, you know, being in the list with my dad.
It's Dennis Gada also making the list as our defending track champion.
You know, to be thought of in that group, certainly a proud moment in my career.
Tucker Reynolds Jr., our own John Brouwer Jr., Mr. Ed Reed Jr.
It was a neat feeling. He's definitely, it was ranks right up there with the championships.
That was really an enjoyable evening.
The 50 favorites I thought it was a great success.
I remember it was a big crowd, and they really loved seeing some of those old drivers.
And just having those guys out there was unbelievable.
It was great. We had a great event.
Jimmy was always a pretty smooth guy.
He was another guy that you couldn't tell how it was going to go for a while because you didn't know how he was set for equipment and all that. But I mean, he had some seasons down here where he really showed that he could do it.
This is Jimmy Broderick, the 1995 Modified Track Champion and the current point leader here at the Waterford Speedbowl. Tell me what you've got driving today.
I got a Wine Company, NEH, Larry's Auto Machine, Chevrolet.
And how did you start?
I used to race motocross first, then I switched to cars that are a little safer.
Okay. What kind of a track is this?
Very fast third of a mile. Someone that hasn't seen a race here, they should come out and see it. It's an experience.
As far as I can remember, when I started, Jimmy was in the 3, and the 3 was one of the cars to beat at Waterford.
How to work's worth it, Jeff. No wonder you couldn't handle it.
Jim, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Jimmy could drive. He proved that. He won Riverside. He won Stafford. I respect for Jimmy. He laid the ground for the 3 car. All I had to do was hop in. So, thank you. And Harry and Jimmy kind of had a falling out there. I was working at Larry's. Harry ended up calling Gary at Larry's and asking him who he thought should put in the car. And he recommended me. He liked the fact that I used to take Harry's old tires and run them on my car and run with Jimmy. So Harry knew that I obviously had something going on.
I'd always admired what he did with what he had. He always had cars that were throw together stuff. I don't think they bought anything, from like a speed shop. If they could build it, that's what they ran, used tires.
I think a lot of what Dennis was able to build upon and improve his talent was the resources of the Wyatt team.
Harry built a beautiful car, well-maintained car. Dennis was a smooth driver.
The best way I could kind of give Dennis a compliment is be following Dennis through traffic. And, I knew I had a pretty good car, and he always had a good car, especially when it was Harry Wyatt's car. Through the first couple of years I was in NASCAR. And you'd see him do something, and he'd make it, at least from in the seat, it would look easy. And I'd be like, I want to do that. Like, I know my car, but I just can't quite do it.
Dennis is a special guy. I mean, he's very intense on the track, obviously.
Definitely has the speedbowl mastered.
And a guy that drove that racetrack as well as anybody probably has ever drove it.
Now they're side by side down to the stretch. Dennis Gada tries to get that Chevrolet motor powered up. Looks like he has the horsepower.
The goal was to win races and championships. Once we got the 3 championships, then obviously I wanted to tie Dick Dunn with the 4.
Off of turn number 4, and it will be at the checkered flag. Dennis Gada in for the win. Ron Juhas Jr. second, and Dennis Gada will claim track championship for the 4th consecutive year.
At that point, he was just larger than life at the Speedbowl.
It was an incredible car.
That car had some magic.
And then once we got the 4, to get 5 was obviously a tremendous goal. That was the main focus for that year.
I thought he was just fantastic at what he did.
Just in awe of what he was doing back then.
Dockenhouse, it isn't about to give up, but Gada's really working the outside lane, creating some impressive magic. Off turn number 4. Brand new leader emerges, Dennis Gada.
A very smooth driver, not aggressive, wouldn't beat you up to get around you or anything like that.
He was never a guy that would just move someone out of the way or just take spots.
He knows how to be a dirty driver, yet be so clean.
I never thought he was dirty, but I thought he was sneaky good about being dirty.
You didn't want to get too close to Dennis Gada in the turn. You know, Dennis Gada could make you regret getting under him in the turn.
I remember he used to have this move where, you know, when someone would get outside of him, he was just sneaky enough to give him a little hip check, and if you weren't watching, really paying attention, you didn't notice it.
Still holding down the front 2 spots on the speedway. Look at the number 3 of Dennis Gada right now, trying to put that car into the 2nd position. He's side by side with Ronnie Silk as they make their way out of turn number 4 back into the front straightaway.
The Gada hip shot in the turns. He just got you just enough to tick you. Not drive you, not send you into the infield, but just enough to break that momentum in the turn.
Just the right spots to advance himself, but not do you bad enough to be mad about it. It was just a good racing move.
It always got that guy on the outside out of his groove.
We got in a wreck. Something happened to Ronnie Juhas blew a rear end on a restart. And I climbed over his right rear, and I forget what got wrecked on our car, but we had to pit and ended up finishing in the back.
Green flag off turn 4, and again, no trouble, front straightaway, Gada's in the outside wall. Car number 3, Dennis Gada, goes to the outside wall. They continue to jam up behind him. So it was Juhas that Gada tried to go around in the outside lane. Juhas came up, and they came together and put the number 3 in the outside guardrail. Now Matt's about to get busy over in the pit area.
No movement as far as the car is concerned. It still does not have its right wheel on the car.
Oh,
so we'll see what happens as they get ready to go back to green.
Yeah, he's going to miss the restart as the pace car is in. Fields off turn 4 without the championship point leader.
Strunk had to finish in the top 5 for him to win the regional championship, and he ended up getting in a wreck also. So we had somebody was on the phone getting updates. Went from heartache to victory.
That was really a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Dennis was a good, clean driver. I mean, I have a lot of respect for him.
I always enjoyed racing with Dennis. We had very little incident.
Dennis, I mean, you can't say enough about him. He's talented. He's a nice personality. I mean, he can do things behind the wheel of the car that you think is impossible.
I don't know if Harry's setup in that car fit Dennis's style or Dennis adapted to the way that car went, but the combination was just awesome.
Dennis Gada was definitely someone I looked up to. The drive for 5 times when he won that 5 championships in a row, and Mr. Outside. I loved watching him drive by people on the outside. It's something I always inspired to do.
On the outside, as everyone knows and everyone's always seen, for some reason he had that, and nobody else could really figure it out at that time.
Gada climbing on the outside groove, pulls almost even. Brouwer and Gada could fit inside the same shoulder harness as they head down the backstretch.
Still locked side by side into turn number 3. Gada up high, Brouwer down low. Carnes has the best seat in the house in third. And then it's Ed Reed Jr. and Ron Uhas for 4th and 5th. Off of turn 2, and the new race leader, Dennis Gada, goes to the front in turn 3.
Was that the specific goal, to be able to run out there?
When they first paved it in '88, Quarterways had paved the track. We had a 50 lap, I want to say, late model opener. And I was 4th or 5th with maybe 10 laps to go. Because the old track, the bottom was the place to be. So to run the top was kind of a new idea. So yeah, I went to the top of I think it was George Brayton and somebody else. And, moved up and moved up 2 spots. So I was like, I know what's got to do now. So yeah, from then on, I knew there was 2 grooves.
Off of turn number 4, Muchacharo down low, Gada up high, and we are back underway.
Sat in the tower, you could see why Dennis would win the races on the outside, because he would sail that car. Anybody else is letting off the gas at the 3rd turn gate, and Dennis is sailing that car another 30-40 feet into that turn. And there was no question why Dennis was winning races. He had enough confidence to run out there that he knew that the car was going to stick out there, and he would just sail it in.
I seen that guy pass cars on the outside like nobody else has done.
I liked watching Dennis Gada race. I mean, I know everybody hates the front runner.
Dennis Gada, I was surprised. I think he was on the podium. I interviewed him. Booze.
And now let's talk to our second place finisher, the driver of car number 3, Dennis Gada. And Dennis, it looked like you tried everything you knew how tonight, and nothing worked against young Chris Patriak.
And I said, how can you boo somebody like that who's just, never says anything bad about anyone?
I never really saw the benefit from a promoter standpoint to having somebody win a lot of races and get these regional and national accolades. I guess you could say it would put that track in a national limelight or a regional limelight that it wouldn't otherwise have, but I can't make an argument that put any more butts on the boards.
You just went there and you thought Dennis was going to win tonight. He was so dominant at that point in time.
If anything, it seemed to just aggravate people because of the way it was officiated.
It seemed like whenever my staff screwed up, Dennis Gada got the benefit. And so a lot of people thought that I showed favoritism toward Dennis. And I felt bad for Dennis, because if I saw him walking through the pits, I would literally go out of my way so that I would not talk to him, because I just didn't want somebody to say, oh, they're cooking up the deal for tonight. And so it was hard. I can tell you the reason that people thought I showed him favoritism was the night I gave him his lap back.
Was that the firework night?
It was fireworks, and we had a chance. Dennis spun to the infield, and there was somebody else. They were in turn 1. They spun to the infield. As soon as the caution came out, he took off. So as standard policy, I took a lap.
Glenn, my spotter, gets on and says, hey, Junior, shut the car down. We're going to take a break. They're going to do the fireworks. I'm like, what? When have you ever seen this before?
During the fireworks, he and Harry both came up, wanted to talk to me, and I said, sure, I got time. And Dennis pointed out, he says, if I spun intentionally, then I had to have the other guy with me spin at the same time. I said, you know what? You're right. And I gave him his lap back. So after that, everybody thought that Dennis and I were in cahoots.
So they did the fireworks, and the race resumes, and the 3 cars up and running is back out. Everybody's scratching their head. don't know what is up with his laps. Do not let him pass you.
People would say the most vile things that, I was going out of my way to create this huge conspiracy, and think about how complicated the conspiracy would have to be to make it that Dennis Gada would win week in or week out because I wanted to have a national champion. There's no upside for a promoter to have a perennial national champion. In a perfect world, in each division, there would be a different feature winner every week, and the guy who won the championship this year was different than the guy who won it last year. Because that would keep everybody excited about when they came to the racetrack, who's going to win tonight? Is it my guy? That's what keeps people coming back, is rooting for their guy to win. So why would I engineer a situation where a Dennis Gada would win every night? It just made no sense. So, yeah, was I proud of those people? Did I go and appear on stage with them? Absolutely. But a direct economic result? Not really. More aggravation than it was worth. Because more times than not, instead of having people say, hey, attaboy for having the regional champion, I was getting, what the hell are you doing letting Dennis Gada win every week?
He was a great car owner. Whatever the car needed, just get it. Getting into racing, when Harry got into racing, he said, I'm going to do this for 10 years, and I'm going to get out. And it's basically what he did.
Harry was just a true gentleman. Never raised a voice, even when he was not happy. He was always very, very calm.
A very smart guy who I'm told was an incredibly good businessman, but ran from any kind of publicity. And Dennis was the same way.
Harry and I are a lot alike. Racing is what it is. Stuff's going to happen.
I think that's why they got along so well together. They're both the same demeanor. Very quiet, very calm. And I don't think they really let anything rattle them severely.
Dennis always kept a pretty even keel. And, that's probably one of his strengths.
It takes a lot to get him excited.
It was obvious that the PR guy's job there was to make him into a big timer, a big hero. And Dennis Gada wanted no part of it.
And I knew they struggled with Dennis because it was hard to promote Dennis because he wasn't the bad boy.
He was not somebody that you could pop up into the limelight. He was not part of that.
Dennis was more laid back. He was easy to talk to, and he answered your questions. He wasn't awful. He was never a yay rah rah cheerleader for himself in a lot of ways. I wish he had been more of that.
If this appears that I'm putting Denny down, I don't mean to do that. But it was like this. I kept saying that this is what we're looking for here. This is like the Cerro at Thompson again. Come and beat Denny Gada. See what you can do against Dennis Gada. And Dennis just wasn't that kind of a person. And not that Denny didn't understand what we were doing. He just wanted no part of it. He did not want to be this great big superstar, right? I remember one time him telling somebody in the press box, I'm a Waterford driver, I'm not a big timer. It's like, oh my God,
I saw him branch out. I saw him run Stafford a little bit. There's certain guys that win a lot at one place that you always wonder, had he grown up at a different racetrack and had he gone on the road, earlier and started running different stuff, what might have happened? And again, it's no shame in being a Waterford guy. That's kind of cool that they've continued that chain. But there's so many guys that stick so close to their home track but do enough there and do enough in those brief appearances elsewhere that you kind of wonder, there's something there that I wish I could have seen more of.
Dennis Gada is probably the best modified driver of the Waterford Speedbowl, at least while I grew up watching racing.
He was probably one of the best that the Speedbowl's ever seen.
White flag out on the speedway for the final circuit as Mike Christopher picks up the win. Settling for the runner-up spot, it's a 44, Jerry Marquis. Reggie Ruggiero able to come across the line in the third spot.
That was the year I drove for Garbarino. We got the pole, and I think we got the track record. We led over 50% of the race, and then the reg got me.
Speedbowl. Let's see if Ruggiero can do it this time. Gets the nose of the number 2 across the finish line first.
For the final time, Eddie Funky Jr. trying to score his 10th career win. Off turn number 4, down to the stripe. It's Eddie Funky Jr. Teddy Christopher is second.
And both the wins were kind of cool wins because one, I beat Teddy Christopher. I just turned left, drove underneath him, and I beat him by, I don't even know how much. I mean, I just barely beat him.
Driven to Rock, your chance to get in on the action with NASCAR Winston Cup drivers. Come to the Waterford Speedbowl, Saturday, July 19th, to see Sterling Marlin, Jimmy Spencer, Dave Blaney, and Steve Park. Get their autographs and watch the 4 superstars battle it out on the track.
Say something. Yeah, get him, get him. Come on, get him. Dennis, get him.
Sterling, turn around this way. Here you go.
We love you, Sterling.
There was a big hype about, obviously the locals were real excited to have big names come, and then you saw a lot of new faces at the track, which was cool. So it was just a different experience. Get to see those guys running around in your local heroes cars was a really cool event to see.
Did they have autograph sessions?
They did. I didn't go to it, but I remember the lines being stacked. They had them behind turn 1. They had them back there, and yeah, there was lines wrapped around wanting to meet those guys.
Brought in a lot of people. I mean, that's great for the track. Anytime you can bring in a lot of people, especially some new people to short track racing.
Well, I think Sterling Marlin was in Jeff Carnes' modified.
What they did was they came around to certain SKs, and those drivers had their own safety guy with them that inspected our cars, and they picked which race cars they wanted to drive.
They sent representative to measure it, make sure it's a safe car.
And Sterling Marlin picked mine, which was absolutely mind-blowing.
Dave Blaney actually came and drove our car, and it was pretty neat.
You know, Brouwer had Spencer with the 49 car, and
He also wanted me to put a mirror in the car because I never run with a mirror. And he says, how come you don't run a mirror? I says, I don't care who's in back of me. He says, oh, okay.
He was worried there was no mirror in the car. He couldn't see out of it good.
Eddie didn't have a rear view mirror in his car. So they were running around, they were scurrying around the pits trying to look for a rear view mirror. I remember thinking to myself, why does he need a rear view mirror? And then once I saw them racing, I was like, okay, I figured it out. So they're just watching each other in the mirrors trying to put on a good show for the fans.
I ran it one time before, and you know, the guys done a great job trying to keep this place up, and just a great crowd tonight. It's awesome.
And he come out of the car and he says, this is a good running car. But he had a smile on his face anyways, you know.
Well, that was pretty cool. I mean, Bill Elliott was a very competitive driver, and I was driving Bruce's car, and we just got that car really flying. Boy, that car handles good. I was really proud to hear that from a guy that knows what he's doing.
The year with the late models we were involved, Kenny Schrader was my driver. Well, he got out and he's like, hey, this thing grips pretty good.
his car was all dressed up with nowhere to go.
What can you do? You gotta grin and bear it.
Hours of work went into Larry Goss's car, getting it ready for Nextel Cup driver Kevin Harvick. He was supposed to get behind the wheel for Saturday's Driven to Rock event at the Waterford Speedbowl, but bad weather prevented Harvick from making his scheduled appearance. It's too bad, because the car was a dead ringer for Harvick's number 29.
It's just a lot of time and effort. You know, me and my cousin and his wife, my mom, and I mean we just went to town, and I'm disappointed. I really am.
And then we had weather the second year. I remember Schrader and Elliott coming to me and showing incredible empathy with the promoter and actually having a plan on how to rescue the night. And I was like, wow, you know, you hear stories about these guys being, you know, overpaid and prima donnas and all that kind of stuff, and they were great to work with. And of course, you know, Kenny ultimately bought interest in a short track and is a real promoter. And you know, subsequent to that, we chatted about, you know, technique and philosophy and that kind of stuff. They were fun events. They just were financially very risky. I made a little money on the first one, and whatever I made, I lost on the second one. I think I chalked it up to breaking even across 2 years.
So you guys didn't lend your car out to them?
Yeah, I wasn't into that.
Did they ask you if you would?
No. I'm kind of glad they didn't.
Everything on the car comes out of my pocket. You know, if there was written agreement that if the thing got wrecked, it was going to be repaired, I might have had, you know, maybe let them use it.
The Cup guys racing it, we didn't. Because Mike was like, no, these guys ain't getting in my car and tearing them up. He goes, because I've seen others, they get in IROC cars and they tore them up back in the day. And we're like, no, we're not tearing our stuff up.
I wanted to watch other people in other people's cars. I didn't want to be watching my car.
You know, racing was in a high point back then, and we just, more cars got in our division and more better drivers, better equipment, and we didn't really think about it. But, you know, you don't know until it's gone what you had.
When I took over in '95, I was convinced, because of what had gone on, what was going on nationally with full-fendered cars, and what had gone on at Thompson, and what had gone on at Seacomp, that modifieds were a dinosaur, that they were on their way out, and that our premier division would be a late model or a pro stock in X number of years, but I couldn't get there right away. And I wasn't necessarily a proponent of doing that. I just thought that's where the industry was going. So I said, you know, we've got to keep the modifieds we have as healthy as we can while we decide how the future is going to be, where we're going to go. And in '94, my favorite race to watch was the late model race. But now, as the promoter, I had to watch every race. And now these modifieds had started to get under my skin, and I became a big modified fan. And we had there for a few years the biggest fleet of SK modifieds we had ever seen. And so they went from being the division I thought was a dying breed to being a division that had the biggest increase in car count. But the late models were just, in those first few years, they put on just as good a show. And I'd rotate them. One night I'd have them last on the schedule, and the next night I'd have the modifieds last on the schedule, and the same number of people left early. And I just think a bunch of things happened that just started to eat away at it. One, you had some key retirements. You know, Tommy Fox wins the championship and departs for somewhere else. CJ Fry quits, you know, somewhere in that mix. You know, and then the level of competition had made the car very expensive. Rules makers before me had made some mistakes in terms of what they let them do with the cars. And then I made some rules changes to that division that 20/20 hindsight I wouldn't have made, that made them another incremental bit more expensive. So now the cars were as expensive as the modifieds, but getting paid substantially less to race. That and a few, and the talent leaving, and it has always bothered me that was, in your words, one of the best late model divisions in the nation, and a few years later it was, you know, it just didn't have car count. You know, it still had some good races, but you know, you weren't running consies for it.
And that is the battle for the runner-up position. Now, in the meantime, while that battle wages on, Ed Reed Jr. on board, car number 27. He's able to add to his advantage as we're now 3 laps past the halfway point. Contact still at turn number 2. Rondo to get the position 3.
raced hard. They didn't have a problem laying a fender on them. They just, when you saw those two side by side, you knew it was going to be a show.
Who will find victory lane here tonight? That is the question. The final time, down the back straightaway, side by side, fender to fender, wheel to wheel. Jay Stewart to the inside, Phil Rondo to the outside. Right there as well, it's Donald, but it's Jay Stewart in for the win.
It looks as though
Jay Stewart with car number 42 will pick up the win here tonight.
Corey Hutchings takes over the lead. Moves down but still running in second, and Scott Cook is back up to third. With 3 graduates from the Strictly Stock Division setting the pace up front.
Jay Stewart, Phil Rondeau, you had Alan Coates kicking butt. There was a lot of good people back then.
We all knew that Alan and Corey and Moose were going to move up to late model. Right. There was no question that the talent was there.
It was time for the next advancement, and I was hooked up with Tim, so we kind of pooled our resources together.
He got fast in a hurry, and he learned what you had to do, and in pretty short order, he was a tough competitor.
Corey Hutchings in command. Here comes the loose man. Hutchins slips up the hill.
Car won the championship in '97. My nephew Jason Melanson bought the car. So he's like, Uncle Moose, drive my car in the 50-lap race. And I'm like, I'm racing 100 lapper. He says, you could win both. I said, yeah, right. Then to go out that day and to win the 50-lapper in the Strictly, the 100-lapper in the late model, it was awesome to come back and do it again with the same 2 cars.
Phil was a good racer, good respectful racer. I respect everybody I race against, but Phil, you raced him. We got into each other a little bit, but you always knew you were good. You were racing hard, and if something happened, it was because of good, hard racing. Phil was, let's race. Let's rub a little bit. Let's race. I mean, don't wreck each other, but fans got to see a show. We want to race side by side, and you never worried about, racing with Phil. You race with Phil. It was like, that was a good race, no matter what.
The year he lost the championship on that last race, he clearly had the position that he wanted. I remember that distinctly. In the last race of the year, he had to finish in a certain spot, and he missed it by 1. But he was clearly in that spot when he came over the start-finish line. But I remember being in that press box that day. To a man, everybody agreed that Rondo did what he had to do, and upstairs they took it away from him. I said I wasn't going to be controversial, but I remember that.
Knew you got to come up with that question.
Was that the one where they erased the tape by mistake? Bill Roberts erased the tape?
Billy Roberts erasing the tape.
Waterford Gate.
Yeah.
St. Hilaire, Tommy Fox, Phil Rondo, the top 5 down the back straightaway. Here comes Coates in the 90, trying to gain ground.
So Coates trying to do everything he can to get back up to the front as he'll try to get around the number 2 of Dwayne Knoll.
Me and Phil were neck to neck for points.
We knew that Alan and Phil were 2 points apart.
I think Alan was 2 points ahead of me going into the last race.
Phil Rondo losing a grip on the championship. The race would end now. It would be Alan Coates unofficially by about 10 points.
I was definitely way ahead of Phil early in the race. I got a flat on the restart. I was like, oh no, this is it. We're done. And one thing with me, if I have to pit and I come back out, watch out, because I don't lift, I'm going.
Back out onto the speedway.
Who will win the final event in the 2001 season in the late model division? Who will win the championship? Green flag is back up in the air, and we're back underway. They'll set sail down into turn number 1.
Rondo looking for the 3rd spot. Down into the corner, Goss, the race leader. White flag off turn 4, and a lap to run.
For the final time, they'll work down in turn number 1, Larry Goss.
Trouble, big trouble at turn number 1. Tommy Fox into the wall, head on. Caution is out.
And they're racing hard. And at the end of the race, they were coming out of turn 4. Alan, Phil, and Corey was involved.
Last turn, coming off the last turn, we're going down the front stretch. I'm going by Corey Hutchings, and I know there was no way Alan could go by Corey to get behind me to finish the spot that he needed behind me.
As they come to the line, I'm watching, I'm trying to watch what's going on, and out of the corner of my eye, Corey shoots to the infield, because he goes this way.
Down the back straightaway. Lane here is needed in the late model
They came across the line like about 4 abreast for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th.
We went over the line and I didn't know who, what, where. I'd call on radio and say, hey, where'd we finish? Did we get Phil? We not get Phil? What are we doing?
Went across the line, had me in 3rd place, and Corey behind me in 4th on the scoreboard.
So you went off the track thinking you got the championship.
Oh yeah.
And I remember everybody in the press box saying, well, Rondo did what he had to do.
We didn't have electronic scoring then. The 2 scorers in the tower both called for Alan to be the winner.
I remember Alan going over the scales and parking his car in the infield, and he was in the infield, and I think Phil was on the front chute, and nobody was doing anything. It was like, well, are you serious? This much time has gone by and they still don't know who won the championship?
Okay, let's see. Phil Rondo is across the scales over on the backstretch. Larry Goss celebrates over in turn number 2 in fine style. All the numbers being tabulated up here trackside. And now, who wins the championship?
And by this time, I've got people yelling in my ear. You know, the tower's getting very excited.
There was some talking here and there about where everybody finished and this and that, and I ended up going up into the grandstands and wanted to see the tape. And Billy Roberts said, yep, no problem. I'll hang on a minute. I'll go check it out.
So we had the guy videotaping at that time, and it was not an official videotape by any means. That's not what the purpose was.
We weren't officially using the video to officiate racing. And I was torn about that. I didn't know whether that was something we should or shouldn't do. But Billy thought it was worth doing, and I let him run with the ball.
So I rewound the tape, and as they come across, I really couldn't see it. So I rewound the tape again, hit play, which I thought was play, and I hit the record button. And it obliterated the tape.
Down to the stride. The white flag is in the air this time by. The white flag will surrender to the checker for the final time off of turn number 2 and down the back stretch. The late model division, October 20.
I had a nice view of the desk in front of me up in the tower.
I think he just honestly, in his non-technology fashion, erased the tape. Not on purpose. Like he was trying to do the right thing and up in smoke.
Yeah. So an incredible finish now. The tabulation goes for who is the champion. Is it Phil Rondo or is it Alan Coates?
Next thing I know is the tape got erased. Only from the 4th turn to the 1st turn.
After the fact, I went out and I talked to Phil. And I said, I really was trying to help you out. I was trying to make sure that everything was what the scorers, I said, officially, I have to go with what the scorers called. I says, as a race director, I'm trying to make sure that the call they made was correct. I says, and unfortunately for you, I did a stupid thing.
And the word that we got from the booth that Alan Coates is your 2001 late model champion. 2 points over Phil Rondo. Corey Hutchings, the driver of car number 36, the foreign auto parts entry. You were 3rd coming in. You finished 3rd in the race. But all in all, Corey, it has been a great season for you.
Yeah, it sure has. It's been a great season. I don't know what happened there at the finish. It was real close. I got underneath Larry for the win, and I don't know. We need a photo finish there, I think.
You know,
Phil was very quiet. He said, okay, that's it then? I says, yeah, that's it. And when he went down to the tower, he talked to Peter after the fact. And he told Peter that he didn't lose the championship that night. He lost it earlier in the season. He didn't do as well in some of the other races that he should have. Excuse me.
I remember that as one of the nights that sticks in my craw.
At the end of that race, there's no doubt in my mind. I had a perfectly good view at the start-finish line, and the videotape would have proved that Phil beat him.
And then he come back down all mad, and I didn't know what happened. And afterwards, they told me, and I was like, uh-oh. You know, I had nothing to do with anything with anybody, because like I said, I just stayed to myself. But I was like, oh, that's messed up, and I felt bad. I'm like, man, that kind of sucks.
Did that create animosity with Coates?
No, I never had a problem with Alan. There was never a problem with Alan. It wasn't him.
You know, Phil Rondo was obviously very upset with how things came down that night, but at the end of the day, it was Bill Roberts' job to run the sporting event, and he used a tool that, you know, it didn't work out.
I just felt so bad. I still feel bad that I did that. I don't like doing dumb things.
Alan was a very smooth driver. He was one of the smoother guys, had good car control.
Loved watching Alan Coates in the G-Car late model days. Just always thought he was a great wheelman.
I always had a lot of respect for his driving style.
Alan Coates always been a really good driver.
He took over where Rondo left off, in my mind. You know, a unbelievable full-fendered metric race car driver.
And him and Corey and those guys put on an incredible show.
Alan Coates, Alan, and every year was Alan. Alan made 1-2, you know, was who made the fewest mistakes. Alan beat me in the brain game for a couple of years, and I figured it out a little bit better.
Me and Corey, back in the late model days, that was fun. I respect Corey. We had some really good racing, and like I said, he's probably the hardest guy to ever race against.
Coates and Hutchings contained melted together. And now Corey Hutchings finally wiggles about a half a car length ahead of Alan Coates to take fourth place.
But I could see he was a guy who was a really competitive player.
Guy never gave up. And then we had some good battles, but, you know, that to me was probably the highlight of my racing with Corey Hutchings. I missed that. I wish we could get that back.
Our first couple years, we were just... we were struggling. We were fresh out of the gate. We didn't know anything about these Mustangs. In 2000, I hooked up with Mike Sagramano, and we built a professionally built race car on a jig. It wasn't ready, so we didn't want to rush it. So it was coming up on the 50-lapper in mid-season. We all got together and said, you know, let's bring the new car for the 50-lapper. We stayed up. I think we were painting it at 3 o'clock in the morning the night before the race. We bring it to the track. We only got the numbers on because there was a big taboo. You can't put stickers on the car at the racetrack. So that was it. It went with the yellow 65 on it, blue car, and we rolled off the trailer and we win the heat race. This thing was lightning fast. We were pumped, tired, living on adrenaline, you know. And so we line up for the feature, and we weren't really a somebody. We were there every week and doing our thing, but we definitely were not considered somebody to win.
That nice new blue car that he come out, he was fast with it.
Roger Perry, another veteran, we reeled him in. And we went by him on the outside like it was nobody's business. was like 2 laps later. I have a problem getting into one. It's like the throttle's sticking. I'm fumbling my foot around there, and I get it undone, and I was like, I don't know, it must have just made me with butterflies and shaking all around. I go down the backstretch into 3, and now I can't get this thing to lift off the throttle.
All I remember is going into turn 3 and me turning left, and that thing just looked like it hooked right.
I can't get this thing to lift off the throttle. It's fully wide open.
And that thing went straight in, and that thing just accordioned when it hit the wall.
And the car just came apart. Tracy Konazik, he painted it, and he didn't make it to the track since it was such a late night. And Sunday morning, he's having breakfast, looking at the newspaper with the air cleaner rolling across the racetrack.
I mean, there was probably 10 to 15 cars that could win on any night.
You had 3 qualifying rounds, 4 qualifying rounds, and they had a full concert. And they took the top 3 out of the concert. A lot of times, a lot of cars going home.
Brandon, wild thing. Fast. You would look at the car, he'd be changing the oil on Saturday, and you're like, how does this thing even stay together? And there he goes.
Off of turn number 4, give the win. And the final checkered flag of the year for the mini stocks to Brandon Clemens. The 2002 champion goes out in style for the season. With a half lap to go, they are still nose to nose on the back straightaway. Richard Brooks looks on in the 3rd spot, but in turn 3 for the final time, will it be Colvin, will it be Jordan? Off of turn number 4, checkered flag. Thank you so much. Woo!
He was always fast.
To the outside, but the battle is most heated at the front, but here comes Richard Brooks.
Early 2000s, we always battling together, you know.
Bill was always fast. He'd go high, wide, and handsome with no problem.
I saw these midweek programs happening. One of the most successful ones was a track in the Midwest that called it Thirsty Thursdays. You know, they put a beer sponsor on it and, you know, low price and, you know, touted selling a lot of beer. We called it Thursday Night Thunder.
Well, what about the Thursday Thunder series in the late 90s?
Don't know anything about it.
Come on, really?
I wasn't there.
Are you serious?
The Thursday Thunder series?
Yeah, it was legend cars, trucks.
Oh, the TNT!
Yeah, see, now you're with me.
The TNT! Ask Eames about those.
Tony Leckie, after seeing how badly it was working, called it Terry Needs Therapy. You know, whatever the mix was that we tried when we tried the Thursdays, it wasn't working. We weren't drawing cars and we weren't drawing fans. But I heard about some tracks that were making their midweek program work.
Terry had actually gone up to Beech Ridge, and they had a midweek show.
I went to Beech Ridge, and I learned about their midweek program.
So he came back and he said, I'd like to start this division. So we created the rules. very loose, stock, and so then we started running it.
You know, we brought it back out of the box with a new concept.
People wore Hawaiian shirts.
More laid back, not as much as Saturday where it was so serious.
It was more of a party atmosphere.
It's just a different atmosphere.
And that's where we came up with the X cars and Super X cars. Basically, they were the enduro cars with a little bit more safety in them.
I love the Super X's. They had so many cars. They don't handle as good as the Strictly, so it's just a bunch of boats diving into turn one and those guys manhandling it.
And I was actually impressed by a couple of the guys because I'm like, man, these guys are wheeling these things and they don't handle them.
Duke was the man to beat. Kowalski, when I started, he was a dominant guy. In that division, in order to win, you had to know how to come from behind, and he did.
Great car count, great shows, you know, $5 to get in.
It started off a little slow, but it got to be a big crowd. I mean, the stands were freaking full. You would run Wednesday night, and then you'd run Saturday night, and the points were separate. The BBs would fill the whole end of the freaking grandstands, right?
He was just a hard-nosed competitor, and then, you know, won the Wednesday and Saturday championship on the same season. Every week they had a wacky race.
They always had some fun races going on, something for the kids to do.
To break up your week of work to go and watch it was awesome.
My thought was, if I can develop new racers on Wednesday to populate the Saturday division and just break even, it would be a thing of beauty. Well, it made money from the first event.
It turns out that that was a pretty good idea. Back then it wasn't. But he had talked about the Wednesday night concept. I was totally against it. I was wrong. I guess that turned out to be a pretty successful deal for him.
And I remember the first 2 years, the gross income went up by like the same amount every week for 2 years. I mean, it just kept incrementally growing. At the time, it really helped propel our growth there for a while.
I didn't do the Wednesdays for 2 years. The Wednesday team was Mark Fish and Sean Monahan. Did Wild and Wacky Wednesday. And when Sean decided he wanted to do bigger and better things on Wednesday, I took his place, and I've been doing it ever since.
Sean the Hammer Monahan. Luckily, I haven't driven against him that much.
Monahan, as everybody knows, is off the charts. But when he puts that helmet on and cages in all that stuff that runs around in his brain, it gives him the drive and focus to wheel that thing.
But here comes car number 31 of Sean Monahan. He's working up to the outside of car number 80 of Norman Root.
because that's a good battle as they work out into turn 3.
Monahan's going for that third position right on the outside. He pulls it away, and Roux almost gets a little bit sideways. He'll gather it back in, and Monahan's currently in third right now.
Every year I start out racing, my goal is to win a championship. And I've thrown, in my opinion, I've thrown a lot of championships away. Because I'm a pretty risky driver. I've always been a wrecker, checker kind of guy. I battled in 99 and 2000 with John Beetham, Jiggsy's nephew. Here's another really cool story about the sport. I remember they put a picture of Beetham coming off the wall, and you could see his middle finger up. The camera hit the back of his car, and he was giving me the bird. And we bounced it off the wall in 3 and 4. I didn't really get along with John. He had a fun crew. It was him, Warren, and another guy, Jimmy. But I heard he was getting out of racing. So I called him up. I went and looked at his car. I bought his car off of him, went and got a motor, found a crew. I found a championship crew. Warren, John Beetham, and Jimmy. They came with the car.
Look at Adam Smith having a very hard time getting around car number 39 of Keith Rocco as the battle continues for the championship as well as the top spot. Jason Melanson, heavy contact into car 17. White flag is out, contact is heavy. Anything could happen as Melanson throws it in very hard underneath Dave Zemke, looking to take away that top spot. It all comes down to this turn, as I'm sure Melanson throws the car in quite heavy. Taking over the top spot, Tommy Silva down low. Looks like the win's gonna go to Tommy Silva. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, if I've seen it correctly, that's gonna put Dave Zemke back to position number 3. We'll have to check with our scores, but it looked like Tommy Silva in car 31 may have come out on top in that one.
Hey, they got together. I can't believe I'm sitting here, man. I was content to finish where I was at.
And champion for 2002, Adam Smith.
This is just unbelievable. I just don't even have words to even describe how I feel right now.
Ed Gertz Jr. is no stranger to success. Since jumping into his ride, the East Haven native has become the Sportsman Division's all-time win leader at Waterford. This year, winning has become a family affair for Gertz and his stepbrother, Dwayne Conant. Conant just started racing last year, and weeks ago, Brantford's own got his first win, beating Gertz, who finished second.
Oh, it was nice. He was protecting me. He was helping me out. It was a beautiful feeling. I just had to get it off my back. I got big shoes to fill here.
When he finished first and I finished second that night, I was kind of his guardian angel. He was close 2 nights previous to that, and both times someone had gotten into him and wrecked him. So I just was kind of making sure I was his big brother and I was going to watch out for him a little bit. It won't happen again.
I would consider Eddie the king of the street stocks, especially back in his heyday with Dickie Mills.
Once me and Dickie started racing together, we bonded really well. When he was a kid, his hero was Billy Greco, lived right around the corner from him.
They pitted across from us, so I always looked at him like as a godfather of the strictly stocks.
Those guys were always the guys to beat at Waterford in the street stocks.
For the driver of the 39, next time by, the checkered flag will fly for what's going to be a very excited young man in the number 39, Keith Rocco.
Keith, how difficult was it? A lot of yellow flags. How difficult was it to keep the nerves down?
It wasn't that hard. I had a pedal motor to rely on.
His first car he bought, his first full-size car he bought from Ryan Stone.
I met a guy named Ryan Stone. He was racing at Thompson. I became really good friends with him, and he told me, he says, I got a street stock. I used to race street stocks. The day we brought it to my grandparents' house to put it in his garage and work on it, my father said to Stone, he said, "What are you doing? Why are you getting my kid involved in this?" Because, my father's been there. He knows what it takes, and it changes your lifestyle. It really does.
Down low, double wide from the 3rd and 4th positions on the back straightaway, and then it's Ed Gertz to round out the top 5. In fact, 1 and 2 in points, side by side on the speedway for the 5th position. Ed Gertz down low, Dave Zemke and the outside lane in car number 17 as they go back to turn number 1.
It's funny, it was, 10, 12 years ago, but I remember that event like it was clear as day, I was out for blood. I was going to win that championship no matter what it took.
We're going to say here this afternoon with more competitors than
the hunt this year than what we had last year in this division. 50 laps on the Budweiser Racing scoreboard. The pace truck is in and set the little round.
There was like 3 or 4 of us that could mathematically do it. My stepbrother was involved. Norm Root, I believe, was involved. Keith Rocco was involved, obviously.
Ed Gershon is outside the number 80.
But we went into one, and I felt my car get light.
Gertz lost a right rear tire, and I just happened to be at his right rear quarter when it happened.
And really, in my mind, I thought Keith shoved me into one and dumped me. But in reality, what it was, me and Norm Root had touched. They pulled the valve stem out of my left rear tire. And when I went into one, I spun out, and Norm got tangled up in it.
And they said that I spun out Gertz.
Rocco gets penalized and goes to the rear of the field. Gary Danko, the pit reporter, talks to his father, Ronnie Rocco, over the PA. Bill, that was a bad call. Don't hurt the kid. He's just a kid. Don't hurt the kid. The most unusual pit interview I ever heard.
We pitted, we went to the back, and we had to start scratch. So now we're on the restart, and I'm a little hot-headed. And I think I passed like 6 or 7 cars by the time we got to turn 2 after they threw the green flag. I could have just settled down and drove into the corner and everything would have been great, but wasn't thinking too good. And I remember going down the back straightaway, and I'm leading those guys, by the way, that I need to be in front of. And as we go into 3, I pass a slow car on the inside of me. I come back up the racetrack, I hit my little cousin, he goes around, everybody's jumped.
He went spinning around and he bounced off the wall, and Norm Root ended up getting wrecked in it.
For the championship contenders, the 80 of Norm Root, the 17 of Dave Zepke. Gertz may have some damage to his car, and Norm Root of Old Sabre. That is a very sad sight. That car being hoisted off the racing surface. That's about as far up.
All I had to do was settle down going into 3. If I just calmed down, I had a championship one.
Over Dwayne Koenig coming into this race. So, and our calculators are going to work overtime to determine the championship in this one.
And it's whoever got to the front first and whoever picked off the most spots.
And 1 year later, the tables are reversed. How about a hand for our champion, Keith Rocco?
Rocco came in about 4 laps and was able to clinch a championship.
That was one heck of a rat race to the front.
That was a brawl. Norm Root, what I remember most about him, he almost won a championship in 2004, lost to Rocco, and he was upset about the way it ended. Guess he wrecked. Came back in 2005 and was the dominant car.
I remember Terry telling me what was going on and that he was talking to this guy, Funkmaster Flex, about putting on an event at the Speedbowl. I was like, you're kidding me, right? Like, how did you ever even get connected?
I got a phone call, and they said, we're producers for a guy in New York. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Funkmaster Flex. I said, yeah, I watch his show every Sunday morning on Spike. And they said, you do? I said, yeah, he's got the best car show going. I've watched it since it came out. Well, he'd like to talk to you about this special event he's trying to put together. When are you available? I said, when do you want to do it? Like, 2 or 3 weeks? No, we'd like to come out tomorrow. So he and I hit it off right away. And, and being an absolute addict for these car build shows, still am today, he really had one of the best of the original shows. He said, I want to invite racers from around the country to race. I said, well, we've got to pick a race car. Well, I'll leave all that up to you. And so we decided that late models were the best universal program, and started scratching our head about how do we make this a good race as well as a good event.
You always heard rumors about crazy events that short tracks were going to put on, and then Terry Eames comes with the craziest that I've ever heard. Is we're going to get this rap mogul to put up a huge purse and invite people from across the country to race in a one-day late model show. And it's like, you're kidding me, right? I remember getting to the track very early that day. It was just electric at the track. The very difference of racers there. You look back now, I mean, Doug Coby was in that event. You know, Ted Christopher was in that event. You know, regular weekly drivers from the Waterford Speedbowl, from all the other tracks in Connecticut. Funkmaster Flex obviously worked hard to get a lot of big names in late model short track racing to show up for that event.
A bunch of different drivers from different areas that I didn't notice. A lot of TV stuff going on.
The entire backstretch billboards, we had to cover those so that the local advertisers weren't seen or any national advertisers weren't seen. You know, it was a whole network clearance issue.
It was a slow arriving crowd, so the TV people got the fans in the bleachers to sit together so it would look good on TV. And it turned out they didn't have to, because eventually the place was packed. The biggest crowd I ever saw at the Speedbowl.
Out on 85, there was just freaking cars everywhere.
We put a capacity crowd in there. I mean, I estimate it to be 8,000 people.
We pull into the racetrack and I see all these haulers and big, huge stackers. I'm like, what am I doing? I got a 1-ton 72 Chevy pickup with an old ratty trailer, and I'm like, what are we doing here? We shouldn't even do this. We're gonna get our butt kicked.
My tech guys, you know, it was a hard job making sure that all these different cars and all these different divisions were semi-equal. You know, Teddy came in with that Southern late model.
Some house car from down south or something, and went out and practiced and like mopped the field.
He brought an AK-47 to a normal knife fight.
Who don't remember Teddy's car? That thing, this is gonna be a Teddy show. He's gonna dominate.
I made him put a restrictor plate on it, and he wasn't happy about it.
You know, I had the big drama going on in the back with crew guys. Hey, they're over there taking carburetor away. Now they're gonna give him a little 350 carburetor. Now they're arguing over there. I'm like, that's fine. We gotta fix this thing to make this thing faster so I can race against them.
Teddy was the guy to beat because of that car.
And it was an awesome race. It was a great race to watch.
They went 50 laps, and they let everybody come in and put tires on. We made adjustments.
We're either running for points for Thompson or trying to finish the Funkmaster Flex race. I was trying to do both, but there just wasn't enough time to do it. We got a capable driver, Matt Kobelut. Maybe Matt can get the car back to the front. It was a tough decision, really tough decision, because I had a great race car.
We were running second to Teddy. I caught him. Tried to go under him, he's blocking me. Tried to go around him, he's blocking me.
And Phil was working him over, and Teddy was chopping him, and Phil's getting into Teddy.
Well, I put the bumper on him going down the backstretch. One way or another, I'm going by him.
And I was like fourth at the time. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, this ain't gonna end good. And they got together.
So I spun him out going into fourth.
And I slipped by, ended up getting the lead from that.
So they threw me to the back. We ended up making it to third.
I took an extra lap because I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm thinking, I pulled in here. I didn't think I was even going to race. This is the coolest thing ever. Prior, I said, Corey, I'll give you a ride in it. He was a little guy back then. You get the first ride. So we get in the thing, we pull away from all the people, nobody's looking around, and me, Mr. Burnout. I did this biggest burnout ever. around the track. Corey's laughing. I couldn't even see him in the seat. He's laughing. Dad, do it again. So we're doing more and more.
Funk Flex wasn't too happy about it when he did that whole shot all the way down the backstretch. I'm pretty sure he thought he was going to blow it up.
Funkmaster Flex goes, "What are you doing to this thing? You're going to blow it up." He goes, "I don't care. I got it for free." His face went so straight. It was the funniest thing I ever did. And I said, "Gary will fix it. I don't care about that." No, that was cool. That was cool.
I wasn't there, and we went to the Outback restaurant in New London. I saw somebody from the track there, somebody that knew me. And I said, who won the race? And they said, some green 90. I was like, yeah, because we did the motor for Alan back then. So I was like, nice.
To see the hometown guy, Alan Coates, win it, blowing burnouts in that classic car that he got from Funkmaster, and everything about it was great. I'll say of my 23, 24 years covering racing, it's still in my top 5 coolest short track events that I've ever covered. Everything about it was just, that whole day was just, it was just such a cool day.
Funkmaster was a lot of fun guy. He was there to have a good time.
I remember the Orange County Choppers were there, and I thought maybe in their reality TV show, you always hear the father and the son at each other. Somebody comes up to Junior and asks him for an autograph. And he goes, "I don't have time to sign an autograph." And his father goes, "Hey, you asshole, sign a kid's autograph." So that's what I knew. What we saw on TV was legitimate.
I got to hang out with the Tuttles there for a little bit.
But I had a lot of fun. I still have on my desk at work a picture with me and Mikey from the OCC. And then my daughter took a picture of me with Lil Kim. And it was a great show.
It was different. It was exciting. For the whole racetrack, it was a very exciting thing. We had new faces, new people, new places. They were talking about us in the news. It was a big deal. I'm not going to play it down. It was kind of a carnival act compared to what we do normally on a Saturday night. But there was a lot of new and exciting things going on. It brought a lot of money, a lot of interest.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I wish they could do that again. They brought a lot of different people, a lot of fast cars.
Theoretically, they probably built a lot of race fans. I don't know if it worked that way, but for one day, it was an unbelievable success.
2 things that I remember about that. There was standing room only, and there were so many people there that you definitely knew were not Speedbowl regulars or had never been there before.
Part of that was obviously Funkmaster Flex and what he was about and where he was from and the industry he came from. And then I think part of that was also the way they promoted LL Cool J, in that he was performing and didn't necessarily put out that he was only performing one song. So no matter what you say about the crowd that was there that day, there was a lot of people that showed up because they thought LL Cool J was having a concert at the racetrack.
A lot of people were upset because the concert they were supposed to have, I think, lasted for 10 minutes.
There were definitely some people that wanted to see more of a show.
LL Cool J came out and performed one song to end the night. And there was a lot of people that thought, wait a second, I sat here all day, don't care about racing, to see LL Cool J, and he sang one song and walked out. So there was a little element at the end of the night of kind of some people that were upset about what went down, but I didn't meet any short track fans that were upset about what they saw.
It was a lot of fun knowing that we were going to be national television.
We all knew it was a made-for-TV event, that they were filming this, that it was going to be edited for later on.
He had a budget from Viacom. The then president of Spike had really made a project out of Flex and had backed everything that he wanted to do.
I think he was trying to get a series.
He wanted to have his own race series. While we're in the middle of producing that one show, the president that had been his angel got fired and replaced with a guy that didn't care about Flex's stuff at all. So he didn't get the resources to edit the show the way it was supposed to be. And the people that got in charge at the network level clearly didn't understand what the event was all about.
The production guys really didn't understand racing.
I think that was catered not to the race fan, but for people who like reality shows.
I threw a party to watch it. Now I'm thinking that at the Groton Motor Inn. It wasn't embarrassing, but it was disappointing. We thought it was going to be something else.
It was all behind the scenes, or not much to do with what was on a track.
It was weird because it wasn't the whole race. You know, they just showed pieces and parts, you know.
There was very little racing on it, and they were trying to do the reality series.
I did like where he did the repetition stuff about Christopher. And that was funny because there's a scene showing me seemingly blowing up at Christopher because Christopher was hot and bothered about some rules thing. And finally I lean in and I go, this is all for the cameras, Teddy. Just chill out. Because we had just, Flex had wanted to create a little bit of drama. So he said, let's go back and, mix it up a little bit with him.
I remember Terry thought it may have created something that would continue at the Speedbowl. And in some ways, when I look back now, I'm glad it didn't, because I'm glad it was just a one-day. I think if it had continued and there had been more events and it got watered down and lost some of that luster, we might not have looked back on the one event and really realized just how cool it was for short track racing.
What did he always say? You heard?
I remember when Teddy would show up occasionally at the Speedbowl, and that was always Darth Vader's here. At that point, Ted Christopher was really the badass. He was the Bad Boys, Mystique, Motorsports.
The winner of tonight's Pepsi 325, Ted Christopher.
All the haters have to admit that you cannot deny that the man can drive.
Any place in this area, if you're going to run races that run SK Modified, you want Teddy to be there. I mean, he's arguably the best known guy in that division, and to have him at your track is nothing but a plus.
Teddy Christopher would come in and he would expect to dominate.
A lot of caution laps late in a race. Do you think those guys behind you had anything for you? I know Tommy was up there and Jeff was up there for a while.
Yeah, I'm on my game plan. I can beat him.
And once we were old enough to get in the pits, we got hooked up working with Ted Christopher, and the first year we actually worked with him was 2001, year he won a national championship, and what a year to join on and be part of his team.
When I was running SKs and I had the first pit stall, Teddy was coming down with his big rig for a big show and wanted that spot. So the track asked me, I told him, well, sure. I said, Teddy can have it, but he's got to buy me 4 tires. So, and it's funny because everybody knows Teddy, how cheap he is. He ended up buying me the tires. Really? So I showed up, yep. He was in my spot. I walked by and he said, you Ed Reed? I said, yep. He says, your tires are over at the tires thing. And that's how we met. And we've been kind of pretty good friends since then.
I have a lot of fun talking with him. He's a ball buster. He's a hell of a shoe.
Teddy is absolutely one of the greatest race car drivers I've ever seen.
Teddy is relentless, and he's the last guy you want to hear your spotter say is on the bumper.
Ted was always one of them. If he was in your mirror, it just drew that little bit extra of, oh man, how's this going to play out? And if you had a restart, he was one of the best on restarts. So you never knew how it was going to play, and you knew you had to be on your A game. Because if you left the door there, he was taking it.
I lost 2 important races to him because he intimidated me. I was leading, he was second. Final restart. Take off, I get a good start on him. Go to shift into high gear. And I always run with 2 feet, one on the clutch. And when I do restarts, I take my clutch foot off and I put it to the brake. Well, during warming up tires, getting ready for the restart, I never took my foot off the brake, and I thought it was on the clutch. So I got the green, took off, got him beat, went to go shift, and stepped on the brake. And he drove right by me.
And he'd always be good in the points because Eddie would finish. Always finish. Like I said, never abused anything. He's a really good racer.
I've always told everybody about Eddie. I mean, he was probably our best sponsor for the car. The fans loved him.
Definitely as a kid, he was like a really cool guy, and he was a fan favorite, and his cars were always awesome looking. And he either had the beard or the buzz cut, the sunglasses on, I always really looked up to him, thought he was a really cool guy, and I was definitely a big fan of him.
Eddie was always a good guy. His first or second year driving a modified, I don't even know if he put a scratch in that car all season.
If I was a car owner and Eddie needed a ride, he'd be one I'd put in the car because he never abused the equipment. Just a good, hard racer.
He always brought the car back in one piece.
Him and Flash would have won a lot more racing if he would have used the horn.
We are different. I will go to the extreme to win, and he would finish second.
because I always wanted to be liked as a driver. It's probably why I didn't win a lot of races. Because, oh really? I mean, some guys don't care if they're liked or not. They just want to win, and I'm not like that. I don't want people to look at me that way.
At least back then, the perception for a while was that you guys were big rivals. Was that?
We were never enemies or anything like that. I've known Eddie since, gosh, I can remember.
Me and Dennis have been good forever. Dennis's mom used to babysit me, so we grew up. There was no rivalry.
I don't know if it was more of a rivalry or just he was the guy that I always had to beat.
There was some tense moments, like in any racing. I mean, I'd bump into him, he'd bump into me. We wouldn't talk for a couple of hours, but there was no real rivalry. The real rivalry was probably more with our fans.
In the Pits now, our weekly racing feature, checking in on a few of the top drivers in the Waterford Speedbowl. Competition on the SK circuit has been fierce at the bowl. Coming into last weekend, the top two drivers, Dennis Gada and Ed Reed, were separated by just 4 points.
Me and Dennis kind of have like a little bit of rivalry, but not as bad as people think we do. We might, get a little upset at each other every now and then, but I mean, that's part of racing.
And what do they think of each other's driving skills?
He's a really good, clean racer. He's a hard driver.
Be nice. If you want to be the man here, you got to go through Dennis. And we're trying. We've been knocking on his door for last couple of years, and I think we got something to match up with him this year. In my time, I don't remember a duo being that consistent with each other. Me and Dennis, finishing 1-2.
Guys who battled it out for the track championship last year are getting ready to battle it out for the lead.
The points are just something that come along. And it's not until you get near the end of the season that you actually start paying attention to them.
We probably had a good shot at it up until September. I think September was just a huge bad month. 4 races in a row, just DNFs probably. I don't know what happened, but went from like 30 points ahead or so to 30 points behind, if I remember correctly. It was just a horrible end to the season.
I mean, we only had to finish like, 19th or something to clinch. We ended up getting in a tangle up early. The whole right side of the car was all smashed in. Somebody, we stopped for an accident. Somebody ran over us, and the headers were ripped off. So we're in the pits cutting the headers off, and Nerf bars, not much there. And the question, can you go back out? Don't cut the Nerf bar all the way off. You can't go out without a Nerf bar and all that. Yeah, it was intense.
We knew we could do it, but we finally did it, so it was like a breath of fresh air.
As there is a new era at Waterford Speedbowl and a new champion, and his name is Ed Reed Jr.
That was a neat feeling, it took me forever for it to actually hit in, but it was, I think it was more relief that I finally did it,
And when he finally knocked the door down, it was a big deal.
To be honest with you, I think it was a breath of fresh air for Dennis, too, because he didn't have the pressure on him anymore.
Almost was like a relief for me, because it was so many. I mean, you race the same guy for 3 seasons. That's like 60-something races that you're trying to beat this guy. And I finally felt like that was over when he won the championship. It's like, fine, you got it.
And he was, besides my dad, he was the second guy to come to see me. Yeah, yep. And he might not want me to say this, but he had tears in his eyes when he congratulated me, which meant the world, Like I said, we've been good friends forever. Actually, his sister made me a banner.
And there's a sign, that is from the Dennis Gada crew, ladies and gentlemen. That sign, congratulations, Eddie Flash and crew, the 2004 champion.
Ed Reed, I think, one of the best drivers in Speedbowl history, he just stopped racing after he won the championship.
Well, every year going up was my last year. I was teasing him right along. You know, it's like, oh, I'm all done after this. You know, you don't get it done, I'm all done. That actually started, I think, in 01. You know, after 01 season, I said, you know, I've had enough. You know, I'm starting a family. And, you know, I wanted more time, you know, to be with my family.
What I remember about, again, interacting with people in the sport, you know, the Root family, the fabric of that family was racing. Don Honig, he bled short track racing and golf, you know. And when I met Terry, I could see that the difference I saw in Terry between those guys was I didn't think Terry bled short track racing. Terry was a businessman to me who loved racing, but he was a businessman first. So there was good and bad that came with that.
See, I remember the first banquet I went to, 2002. They had one rain out this year. Terry Eames tells everybody they had a great year. Now, the next year, they had 5 rainouts in a row. And all of a sudden, you started hearing the rumors.
There had been rumors that Terry was going to sell the place. There was some issues business-wise with the group that owned the Speedbowl. And I knew Terry had been looking at his options.
There were so many different stories floating around that you didn't know who to believe.
There was all kinds of rumors flying around and what was going to happen, and nobody really knew anything.
I didn't have a very happy personal life at the time. My ex-wife came into the business and hated it. So when you work in a very challenging business, you're fighting Mother Nature, there's disappointments day in and day out, and you go home to a situation where it's like, I don't know why you even keep that place. You know, it's very hard to stay upbeat, you know, about the business that you're in. I had taken some option money one winter from a real estate developer on the place. At that point in time, I was unhappy enough that I looked at selling it for whatever use, whether it was to somebody that wanted it as a racetrack or to develop it.
That's when the first development package that Terry, you know, when Terry was originally going to sell to a developer, I knew he had at some point signed an option to sell the place.
I told it to somebody in confidence. They told Sean Corshane about it.
You know, it just seemed like everybody was tense a little bit, didn't know about the future of the place.
Yeah, I was really worried because he hadn't really heard much about this yet.
So it was really the first time that a sale could be, and not keep it as a racetrack.
And who knew at that point the horror story that it was beginning.
That was really the beginning of the dark cloud being over there that I just couldn't chase away.
Home track family atmosphere of it. You know, I mean, it's a place where friends go to hang out. You know, it's a place where you know families hang out. You know, I mean, it's a big, you know, it's a community.
The Speedbowl in particular, I think, is just a family atmosphere, and there's a core group of supporters.
It's home in a lot of different ways. Even though I went to a lot of other tracks growing up, I love going to Speedbowl. I mean, for me, there's nowhere better, like on a Saturday night in the summer. Where else you gonna go on a Saturday, right?
If you left the racetrack, you can find clusters of haulers at the different light poles out in the parking lot. And it was like a party every Saturday night.